I'm Carol Miller with the Peaceful Skies Coalition. Our facilitator for the day is Peggy Nelson. And so I want to introduce our newest Taos County. I wish I lived there. The back of my property is Taos County, but I'm stuck somewhere else. I don't have a wonderful woman commissioner, and we're really proud of Candace O'Donnell, and she's going to say a few words to open our meeting. So, Candace.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome all the out-of-state or out-of-town people for coming to our beautiful community, and all our local people, and I see a few people from my district, which includes Penasco area, Taos Canyon, and Cañon. And hopefully Picadillas Pueblo will be here, and I could just stall and wait for them. But I most recently received a complaint from someone who lived in Talpa about the military flyovers. I can't remember the exact date, but it's been in the last 6-7 months. We called the county's Homeland Security liaison, and he, to the best of his ability, traced it to Colorado. I guess Fort Carson, is that correct? Beyond that, that's as far as it went. But there were about 8. I heard them that day, but they flew very low in Talpa and frightened a lot of people. So, and I know Carol, so I'm just here to thank everyone for coming, and I'll be listening for a couple hours. And so it should be a very interesting event. Thank you so much.
Kathleen Williamson's going to introduce herself a little. I've got your song programmed to just singer, songwriter, attorney, political activist, you name it, she does it. So.
Oh, sure. I forgot this is being broadcast. Good morning, I'm Kathleen Williamson, and you're listening to The Cool and the Crazy. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. I've lived there in Tucson since 1986 and in Arizona since 1974, and been a witness to this this mission creep of military flyovers in Tucson as Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. I'll be doing a presentation later explaining more about that and describing it. But in the meantime, because of being subjected for decades now to Davis-Monthan's flight path and now Tucson International's military aspects of their flight path, I ended up writing this song called My Hometown. We're also famous for Raytheon. It's one of our biggest employers. We have the Davis-Monthan's a huge employer, and then we have Raytheon. And so when the Iraq War broke out, and I was watching television and all these people getting killed and looking into the eyes of, they don't report in the same way today that they were back when that first Iraq War broke out, but looking into the eyes of Iraqi people on the TV screen and so forth, I just started writing this song that opens up with the lines, "The bombs that killed your sister's child were built in my hometown." And so this song that you're going to hear now is called My Hometown, and I had the honor of actually performing it on Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Wow. Experience. So, thanks.
Bombs that killed your sister's child are built in my hometown, but we dare not speak a word of that or risk a sideways frown. Oh, there's nothing.
I'm sorry. I thought I plugged in like 100 things this morning. I skipped one.
Bombs that killed your sister's child are built in my hometown, but we dare not speak a word of that or risk a sideways frown. Oh, there's nothing you can do but watch the news and flash. Our desert skies are thundering with returning jets. polarizing SUV. We sacrificed our freedom in the hopes that we'd be free, and then we could liberate those people living overseas. Oh, Jerusalem, where the prophets are estranged, our mighty leaders pray out loud, home out of range. The bombs that killed your sister's child are built in my own time. But I'd climb the highest ziggurat to trade your time for mine. The camera steals into your eyes, the windows of your soul. Your graveyard once was Eden, the cradle of us all. The bombs that killed your sister's child are built in my hometown. But we dare not speak a word of that or risk a sideways frown. Oh, there's nothing you can do but watch the news and fret. Our desert skies are thundering with returning jets. They haven't finished yet.
So there's personal responsibility built into it because it's built in my hometown. Thanks.
Followed up by, not supposed to be, but none of us are free unless all of us are free. That was a lucky segue, I guess. So, thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.
So we're, you're gonna, Enrico, are you
Yes.
gonna bring up that PSC National, or should
Yes,
I do
National,
it?
I'll go ahead and pull that up.
Okay.
I'll put it up on both of them if that's
Okay,
what you want.
so then I'm gonna sit here,
Okay, that's
if
fine.
that's okay.
perfectly
If that, is that okay with everyone? Because you're welcome to rearrange a seat or what have you. And if we take the paper off the,
Sure.
okay. Okay, so I think if we push that up a tiny bit. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to do a brief, hopefully brief introduction, looking at the magnitude and why our small group in Taos started realizing that this was bigger and bigger and bigger than we had ever thought. And there's some, so the big picture, this is last year's, this is the report the Pentagon gives to Congress every year, the base structure. So they have 557,000 buildings that the Pentagon has, over 5,000 sites worldwide. And remember, we saw a map that people are trying to guess, is it actually 900 or 1,000 bases? It's actually sites. Sites include bases, but there are all these other places that the Defense Department operates. Some of them are called camps, some are their off-site locations. We're talking about an incredible number of sites and, almost 28 million acres. This is a very big thing. This is just to show sort of the global tentacles, and, you can find that online and read the small print. It's just to show this map would never be published in the US. This is a Canadian map made about the US bases. Because what a lot of people don't realize is the United States thinks no one else in the world is spending enough on military. And so there's very extreme pressure being put on people all over the world to increase their military spending. Most controversial in Japan. Japan has a pacifist constitution that forbids them from having really anything besides a very small defense budget. And dating back to 2004, the first time I was in Japan, every day in the newspaper was the Americans are pressuring us to amend our constitution and get rid of the pacifist plank and to spend more money on militarism. And so this one shows there's US spending and there's the rest of the big spenders. And what the myth is, it's actually more on the US, because when the US sells F-35s to South Korea, we taxpayers still are paying for most of it. It's a way, this is a budgetary shell game to make it look like other countries are kicking in. But in reality, a lot of the money that's being shown as other countries is still coming out of our pockets. So this is planning out to the future, and the only thing I want to point out is that despite testimony given 2 days ago in Congress about the military is in terrible shape, can barely keep itself operating with all the cuts that it's faced, this is the actual spending. And they go out way far into the distance. They're planning years ahead. I've seen military spending charts that go out to 2070. So, and the one thing I hope doesn't happen, yesterday we started our meeting feeling very good about a victory in North Carolina that we hope holds. It's because they wanted to go into a natural area with incredible migratory bird life, one of the biggest flyways and wintering sites, and so they were able to stop that. But we thought we stopped military activity here in the late 90s, and it turned out the base got a new mission, they had different kinds of aircraft, and they came around again. They're planning out 70 years in advance, all the time, what they're going to be doing. So this picture, some of people have seen, if you Google elephant walk, you will get dozens of these. An elephant walk is when they line up all their planes and they slowly creep down the runway and they start taking off. So this is just one base, and Kathleen, here's the F-16s. We're talking about an enormous amount of equipment, aircraft, ships, that goes on and on and on. So this is the one that makes me very unhappy, and I know it's hard to read, but if you look at that blue line, that's Air Force training funds. Something is coming that is a huge increase. That line goes way up there in the next few years. Where is all that training going to be happening? And how is all that training being funded. You see the Navy is shown slightly less. It's more level, but there is a planned great increase, and I think it's related to the turkey that can't fly, the F-35. $1.5 trillion program for a new Joint Strike Force fighter bomber that can't fly in the rain. They've never been able to protect it from lightning. They've tried all kinds of lightning rods, and it would go down in a lightning strike. It's just a very bad thing, and the government had sold planes to countries that are now bankrupt, like Spain and Greece, and our government is actually forcing them to keep buying these F-35 fighters, even though their own country really needs the money for more important things, like sustaining itself and its healthcare systems and its education systems. And then this is the real trend. And the only line that's important, what's staying level, is special ops. Where the military is going is all these special operators, as they're called, that really operate very independently. Hollywood couldn't wait to make a movie about the murder of Osama bin Laden and showing how the Navy SEALs and going in there. The money that we're talking about is going into special operations. And these are, current numbers. They go way out into the future. So you find a map, and I don't know why it's so big there, but you go online, you find a map that says there's 87 Air Force bases on the continental US, but in reality there's 274 because they didn't count naval air stations, they didn't count National Guard bases, Marine, Army airfields. Everybody has an Air Force. The Marines have an Air Force, the Army, the Navy, and of course the Air Force. And that is pretty extreme. So here's just some sample costs per flying hour. And this slide is the one where in my day-to-day life, as I run into people and I talk about why I'm opposing all this endless military training, these are the costs per hours. I could have put up every plane, but the B-2A stealth bomber used to only cost $86,000 an hour to fly, but now it's up to $135,000 per hour just to have that plane in the air for training purposes. The F-22 is up to $54,000. The F-22 is very troubling because their stealth coating is sickening. The people that actually have to clean the plane afterwards, the maintenance crews, the coating on the plane is so toxic that it's harming the people that work on that aircraft. And we're assuming that that is going to hold also for the F-35 and for future. I started out as an anti-nuclear, very much focusing on anti-nuclear until I realized how big the Pentagon thing was and that nuclear is really, in the big scheme of things, as horrible as it is, a micro topic within this gigantic umbrella that's going on. But the Pentagon needs, and there was a hearing on this 2 days ago, they must have 80 to 100 new bombers solely for the purpose of dropping nuclear bombs. That is the only function that our current aircraft can't do. And so that is on the drawing board. But the Air Force, the nuclear Air Force is a mess. I mean, the public's heard about some of it, and they mistakenly ship nuclear missile fuses. They lose this stuff. It's in transport all the time. A lot of us probably aren't aware, but here in New Mexico, there's an endless stream of nuclear bombs on the roads, going from Los Alamos to Kirtland to Pantex. In Texas, it's like back and forth, back and forth. They're constantly on the road. If New Mexico was a country, it would be the third biggest nuclear power in the world. There are 1,200 nuclear bombs just sitting in Albuquerque. So, you know, we need to keep that in mind. And so 9 Air Force commanders were just fired. Everybody was cheating on their tests. That was a recent scandal. And then there's the whole issue of, is the country for the people or is it for the Pentagon? Because the Pentagon generates 1 ton of toxic waste per minute, and that's their numbers, okay? And that does not include the nuclear complex, okay? It's endless. 900 of the 1,300 Superfund sites in the United States that are recognized are military Superfund sites, polluted, in need of cleanup. So Camp Lejeune is a good story because when we go to these meetings, the scoping meetings and the public meetings on environmental assessment and the like, we're always hearing that the training has to happen because they're taking our young men and women, which is true, and that they have to get the best training possible. But on the other hand, they would cover up for 30 years that they were giving people toxic water to drink on one of their bases, Camp Lejeune. 1 million people lived and worked there drinking this toxic water. And in 2012, now the survivors of that are eligible for care in the VA, and they can get in line behind Bob and others that are wait for their care. So 500,000 people qualified for VA coverage because the Marine Corps poisoned them while they were living on base. And that's not the only example. Camp Minden, Louisiana, that's tons and tons of explosives. The Army left the base. A private company, Explo, came in, was continuing to produce explosives. They went bankrupt and they walked away. And because it's in Louisiana, the EPA gave them permission to just burn it in the open air until the people learned that they were going to have 80,000 tons of explosives burned every day for over a year. And so they've organized and rallied, and right now it appears the Army is going to spend the extra money to find another way to treat it. They would like to send it to Utah, which is where they deal with a lot of these unused explosives. We bought all that. And they're making more today. And there's tons and tons. Each one of those is a drum full of explosives that is never going to be used. Now, they blew up on their own recently, and that's what brought in the EPA and the Army and the community. And, you know, that's quite tragic. The Center for Public Environmental Oversight, after the last BRAC, the base realignment process that the military goes through and they close bases, this organization formed because it wanted to make sure that the bases were going to be safe for civilian use. And, you know, most munitions are never used in war, as the slide says. They just sit around. And then they become outdated. Now, I could see a loaf of bread or something, or we hear all the time the nuclear bombs are outdated and we need new ones or new parts. But so here's what they have on hand right now, over 1 billion pounds of munitions that they don't even know what to do with. I mean, there is no safe way to deal with this. And I like to quote, one of the best talks I ever heard was Winona LaDuke, a Native American activist, said she thought the U.S. should run on mom's rules, which you can't make a new mess till you clean up your old mess. And, you know, I like to cite that. And that's actually something that a lot of people, as you talk to regular people and you say, well, what about mom's rules? What's mom's rules? Almost every mom, dad, sibling, it's like, you can't make a new mess till you clean up your old mess. So, you know, I'm always looking for language that isn't alienating as we talk to people, that they really get, you know, what it is we're talking about. So corruption in the military, I felt I wanted to share a little about that. The Pentagon has never passed an audit. People know that there are several pallets of US $100 bills that disappeared in Afghanistan that people saw being offloaded and no one knows where that money went. We actually shipped pallet loads of cash to Afghanistan and Iraq, and there was no accounting of that. And funny thing, no one knows where it went. So, but the sexual assault, thank goodness, has started to become recognized. And Lackland Air Force Base, so far as we know, was the worst, where the training staff had basically a policy of raping the young recruits, the new enlisted people. That's the first place you go at 17, 18, maybe 20 years old. And the charges are coming. There's some people have gotten very heavy sentences, life in prison. Some of the people that were involved in the cover-up. It turns out everyone knew that this was happening on that base, and they would report it. And so there are a number of 20-year prison terms, and 2 people, I believe, have gotten life in prison. But these young people that we're sending to the military, their lives are ruined. I mean, if anyone saw any of the testimony of the young men and women that had the courage to come forward in Congress, they're not getting over it. They had given all their trust to the exact person that turned around and committed a criminal act against them. So the economic benefit of militarism, we hear that a lot here. Here's the real economic benefit. The top 5 CEO pay was $21.5 million in 1 year, and they weren't even the top. It was Honeywell. These companies, they're all in Arizona, they're all in New Mexico, they're all everywhere. They're all in Colorado. That's who's making money from war. And who's paying the price are poor and working families whose children are going to war. So the Peaceful Skies Coalition, our position, and I think we'll get into this a little bit, that no NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, no procedure that is underway now is valid because the Pentagon has failed to provide a baseline. The first thing that's supposed to happen with any NEPA activity is they say, here's the baseline, and then and then you build up from there what the cumulative impacts are. And I know a lot of people here have responded to numerous of these various NEPA things. So we say over and over, every time we submit a comment to either the Army, the Navy, or the Air Force, we tell them this whole process is invalid and you have to stop until we have an actual baseline. They draw these circles of airspace like there are walls in the sky, So here's Cannon's airspace and here's Holloman's airspace. Well, it's air. And they're saying, well, we only have to talk about what's happening here. And that's not really the case. There is, and we get caught up, we're volunteers trying to respond to a very highly paid military and defense contractors that they hire to do these. And we're going to hear about how tired some of our communities are that have had, I think they've had 6 in the Puget Sound, Olympic Peninsula area this year. Fort Carson has had 4. They're right over the line from us in Colorado. That they just break into these little pieces and say, well, we're already flying, I'll just say 100 planes a day, and we're only adding 25 more, so there's no impact. And, it just doesn't work that way. So here's what we think must be in a baseline, and we also think to talk about wildlife and birds and sea life without using a bioregional approach is just, it makes a mockery of the whole regulatory process. To say, well, the Gunnison sage grouse hatches its young in, May. So we won't do things in May, we'll do it in January. That isn't how nature works at all. And then,
What's that noise? Yeah, I'm taking off the microphone.
so here's what we always say. Right now, there's a big assault on the national forest and the other public lands, national parks, the BLM. There's a proposal called the Hammett out of Fort Carson to do 52 new helicopter landing zones in Royal Gorge on public land. And we're going to hear a little more about what's going on in the Cibola National Forest, the Olympic National Forest, and others. Our position is no military use on public lands. That we're pretty firm on that. Our region was just now is the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. We submitted comments that said no military use in this area. We haven't heard back from the BLM. So I just want to show, because I'm a masochist, so every day I get an email from the Pentagon called the Defense Digest, and it lists every contract that they've given. It's billions every day. But this is one small contract, but it's a good example of how they spread the money on. This is how they get the congressional buy-in. Okay, this is one contract. Utah, Georgia, California, New Hampshire, Arizona, California, Idaho, Kansas, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Illinois, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Texas, and Toronto, Canada even got 1%. So they take the funds and they scatter it, and they immediately have, how many members of Congress is that? They have all those members of Congress now scrambling to keep that program funded. And I see this every day on the list of contracts. It's a very brilliant strategy. It really is. And, so this is what I hope we talk about. And I know it's hard to read, but
Zoom it out a little bit.
This is a Gallup poll where they read a list of institutions in American society and say, which do you trust? What do you have confidence in the most? And it's the military. And the military went up and is consistently going up. Despite all what we know now about the sexual assaults, despite what we know about the pallets of money that just disappeared, despite what we know about the pollution, this is our challenge. It goes military, small business, the police, church or organized religion, the presidency, the medical system, the Supreme Court, public schools, criminal justice system, banks. How'd they even get on there? And banks are going up in trust. TV news, newspapers, Congress is at the bottom, and their confidence has gone down. But this is a real dilemma for me, because in my daily life, I work for real people. I've worked in public health for more than 40 years. I'm helping run a community center. We do programs with children all the time. How have we failed to get the message to the American people? But here's good news. We're here. Our friends that are joining us online and by e-meeting are here. This is a first. And this is the way that I can end on an upbeat note, because there's something growing here where people are coming together. And I just have one. This is front page news in Japan, Tokyo. We've got the former mayor of Taos down at the bottom there, and the former governor of Picaris Pueblo, a picture of Taos Pueblo. We get more media coverage in Japan than we get anywhere in the US, because they feel anything we do is going to benefit them. And it's just amazing. I mean, we had probably 15 different TV crews and reporters from Japan come through Taos, New Mexico, over the last couple of years. And people wanted me to show this. I don't know if we can get it where we can see it. This was by popular request, but it's
Can you zoom it out, not
It's
in?
zoomed out as far.
yeah. If we push it forward, does it go smaller?
a little bit.
Yeah. So can you click to start the?
Okay.
Is it showing the little bar, or do I do it?
We're watching your. And it says media not found on mine.
Oh, okay.
So this media wasn't attached.
Okay. Well, we had enough aircraft noise, but what this is showing, and we can look at it later possibly, is one osprey landing, breaking all the branches off a tree and injuring all the people who had come to this air show on Staten Island to watch it. And you see all the EMTs and everybody rushing over to aid the people. And the osprey lands and all the military guys are running the other way from where the people are injured, and then they all get down with their guns. They were trained to, demonstrate how they come in and land. So we will have a chance, we can watch it later. But I just wanted that big picture. We're dealing with an institution that is very much trusted by the American people. And they're not getting the message that everything they're sacrificing, education, healthcare, infrastructure, all of those things. So that's just a background of why we realized here in Taos that we needed to reach out to the others organizing. So thank you.
I do hope you get a chance to see that. Carol introduced me before, but my name is Peggy Nelson. I live in northern Taos County and was asked to come just to try to facilitate things. And I think this morning's going to be easy because I'll essentially be a timekeeper. This afternoon may be a little bit more of a struggle as everybody decides exactly what course of action is going to be taken. But in any event, we're fairly close to being on time at this point. And what I really don't know is who's here in person and who's here by remote access. And I'm going to leave that to the text to let us know and somehow get them online. But just know that I'm going to try to keep you to 10 minutes. Maybe at about 8, I'll try to give a little signal or say something just to see if we can have things move along. I also know that in putting this together, Carol has allowed for the fact that it might go over a little bit. So as we get going, anybody just want to get up and stretch? Because everybody seems okay, and actually you're back there so you can do that as you wish. So the first one who is up is Rick Abram of the Citizens of Ebays Reserve? Ebays, thank you, on Whidbey Island. Lots of activity there, I know. Come on up.
As a kid with the last name of Abraham, I always got called first for everything and hated it. So here we go again. Who am I? I'm here representing the citizens of Ebays National Historic Reserve. They're located on Whidbey Island. I moved to Whidbey Island from Texas. I've been there about 8 years. Like a lot of people, I moved there for the peace and quiet and quality of life. And of course, we don't have that. We don't have it where I live, and the folks who live in and around Ebays National Historic Reserve, they don't have it either. The problem is these Growler jets. F-18 jets, they're the loudest jets ever made. They fly low over people's homes, over places of business, parks, schools, hospitals, and they generate hazardous levels of noise, levels of noise that have been documented to cause harm to people, wildlife, to value properties. And we heard some of those horror stories last night, and people have their own experiences in their own communities. Of course, these are Navy jets. An environmental impact study is being done. These studies are supposed to look at the potential harms of these military operations. It's interesting because the harms are occurring before the study is completed. Shows you how serious they are about how much they really care about the harms that they do. There's a history of jets flying at this location. Before the Growlers, the F-18s, there were the Prowlers, but there's never been a complete environmental impact statement done on any jet flying at Whidbey Naval Air Station or the outlying field. And I want to talk about the outlying field because we saw a great presentation last night where they wanted to place an outlying field. I believe it was North Carolina, and people fought that successfully. Way to go. You give inspiration to folks back where we are in our island, to all of us. You know, we can win these fights, and we need to learn from the lessons that we need to learn from what you did, and we will. Unlike your situation in North Carolina, we didn't have politicians on our side, not a single one, because the Navy is located right where they want to do this major expansion, continue flying these jets. And so we have hostile politicians, we have scared politicians that are on the fence, won't take a position. And behind it we have the Navy and their front groups that have created divisions in the community. We have a divided island, threats of violence. It's a very ugly situation. So, and then there's the jobs blackmail. You know, we're going to be against the jobs. I'm sure some of you have heard this in your own fights. You know, like if these folks want to move the base, they want to close down the base, we're going to lose our economic base and jobs, and the community will suffer. You know, the same old stuff. It's interesting. I come out of a background of community organizing around environmental issues, and we used to hear that pollution was the smell of money, and now this jet noise is the sound of freedom. What it is the sound of freedom being denied. These Growlers, it's the sound of $86 million jets, probably more now, ruining the lives of people and flying at just an outrageous cost to us all. But the problem is not just the Growlers, as you know. The problem is the Navy. It's a problem. It's the military culture. It's the politicians who no longer represent their constituents, who bow to pressure from special interests. And to be honest, the problem to some degree is with us and people who have forgotten how to fight and for too long have trusted their lives, their safety, their interest to someone else, to politicians. That's not how democracy was supposed to work. It's not how it worked in the beginning. So we got to make it work again, which means we have to take control, we have to be involved, and we have to learn how to fight back. Citizens of EB's Reserve started out, in my opinion, as a NIMBY group, not in my backyard. But what they learned in the fight, which a lot of people have learned, is you can't win these fights without allies. And it's wrong to shift a problem in your backyard to someone else's backyard. And what we learned in the course of our work is that the harms that these jets were doing, this noise was doing, was not just local. It was regional. And it was in the towns where the military bases are located. That there's large groups of people who are afraid to speak out, but who are being harmed. And they're waiting for someone else to set an example, to stand up and fight back. And so, you know, part of what we have to do is reach out to those people. And what's happening in our area is, this is a major expansion. You know, this is not just about one little outlying airstrip where they do touch and go repetitive flights like they wanted to do there. This is about a major military expansion in the area. They want to take these jets, fly them over the Olympic Peninsula. You're going to hear more about that. Do warfare training over the National Park, at the Olympic National Park and Forest. They want to do more of the harms that they're already doing. Deception Park, which is our most visited state park, has warning signs up. about jet noise, and and people aren't going who used to go. There are farms that are losing customers, businesses closing down. So, you know, it can't be just about not in our backyard. It shouldn't be in anyone's backyard. Now, what our organization is still having to learn is how to fight and how to be effective against what we're up against. We're fighting an adversary that has all the money in the world. They've got legal resources all they want. They've got public relations experts. They have connections to the government. They've got access to the media. They are the government. They have access to the media. They want something in the news, they can get it. And they've got the politicians in their pocket, the best politicians that money can buy. And who are we, and what do we have? We're volunteers. We don't have paid staff. Few organizations do. You know, we've been marginalized. Most of us aren't professional activists, although we're kind of learning how to become that way. So we're having to learn how to fight, and it is a hard, tough, frustrating road to hoe, as we say in Mississippi. Road to hoe has to do with cotton, and but people are fighting because they don't have a choice. It's their livelihoods, it's their children's future, it's the future of this country. So people are having to fight back, and they're learning how to do it and be effective. And we need to learn from each other, you know, how to do this. What works, what doesn't work. And as an organizer in about 30 years history of organizing around a bunch of issues, I can just tell you, we've got to be creative. We've got to think out of the box. We've got to anticipate. We've got to keep them responding to us and us just not responding to what they do. And so together, I think this organization is, it's the next step. You fight locally, you fight regionally, you fight nationally, and you build alliances. I'm very pleased to be here and excited to be part of this. So thank you.
I can see this is going to be a self-regulating group. So
How many
my job's
minutes?
gonna be
Well, I'm
easy.
just curious.
9.
Oh, you
Perfect. We have one more. The next on the agenda is Roseanne Greco and others from Stop the F-35 Vermont.
And they're online. And let's see.
The
Go
first
ahead.
test. Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
So there are 8 of us here, and we're gathered in my dining room. So we don't have, everybody say hello. Hello. Hi. Everyone. We don't have the same kind of color. I get all that. Can you unmute? Can you mute? I am muted.
Can we see?
We don't have the same
Is
kind
there a
of
way to
color.
object that?
I have to switch off of her computer, and so we'll see. Excuse me.
What did you say?
You go ahead. We're trying to listen to you. Thanks.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we don't, as I was saying, we don't have the same kind of polished presentation as you've all been given, but you've said words that we have heard up here. There's apparently a script that is being played out across the country. We have been told, you know, that noise is the sound of freedom, and the same kind of political rhetoric that you've heard in your places too. We've been called unpatriotic and more. But let me give you a little bit of background for those of you that don't know what's been happening here in the Burlington area of Vermont. Back in 2008, we were identified as one of the bases for the first bases for the F-35A Joint Strike Fighter. We have an air guard base here that is co-located with the Burlington International Airport. They do not have their own base. It is a station that shares one relatively short runway with commercial airliners. I don't know what this means.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, So, long story short, they came and did an environmental impact statement, which they released to us in March of 2012. And there were 6 bases on there, 3 active duty bases and 3 guard bases. We were one of the 3 guard bases. And after an extensive comment period, 2 years later, we were selected as the preferred alternative. And the Air Force came out with their record of decision, citing Burlington as the first base to, first guard base to hold the F-35. A few things to note about this environmental impact statement. It came out in draft in 2012, in March of 2012, and based on all of the comments they received, they came out with a revised EIS. To give you an example of the comments they received, at the first draft, they received over 900 comments, 934 to be exact. All but 30-some came from Burlington area. And overwhelmingly, the percentage of those that opposed the basing far outnumbered the people that were in support of the basing. They got a number of things wrong in the EIS. We challenged it, and so they came out with a revised EIS. That generated 11,000 comments. Now, 10,000 of those were pre-prepared postcards that were created by the supporters of the F-35, which are, in our case, the Air National Guard, the big politicians here, big businesses. And they so convinced the people that if they didn't support the F-35 coming here, that the Air Guard base would close. And on those postcards that they mailed out to 10,000 people, they had statements that contradicted what the Air Force said. The Air Force tells us the F-35 will be 4 times louder than our current F-16, but yet on the postcard it said that it wouldn't be any louder. So that there were lies on the postcard and people sent them in. We had no support at all from our politicians. In fact, our most senior politician, that's Senator Leahy, actually behind the scenes went and strong-armed the Air Force to pick Burlington. There's more to go into on that, but I won't. But as a result, the Air Force picked us as the first base for the F-35, and this was in December of 2013. So the group of us, the Stop the F-35 Coalition and other coalitions, including Save Our Skies Vermont, we have sued the United States Air Force. We also have a lawsuit. We sued the city of Burlington that owns the airport for failing to review the environmental impacts to our area under a Vermont statute called Act 250. That went before the Vermont Supreme Court last November. They ruled against us, but came back with a separate statement saying, in effect, we had the right to sue under another provision. The status of that lawsuit is our lawyer is now looking for a lawyer who will take our case to the U.S. Supreme Court. And that would be heard under the states' rights, federal rights basis. We are suing, the other lawsuit that's in place now is our lawsuit against the United States Air Force. Right now, we are in the process of back and forth with the Air Force. They provided us, the judge in this case, asked to see the administrative record, which is not usually done. The Air Force provided that. They gave us 8,000 documents to review, and that's we're in the we're going through those 8,000 documents right now. We have another week or so before the time is up on that to challenge the Air Force. The basis of our lawsuit is that the Air Force failed under the NEPA process. They failed to provide data they were required to provide or inadequately provided data. So that's the basis of our lawsuit against the Air Force. We have been very active over the past 3 or 4 years. I'm going to show, if I'll spin the camera around, some of the things we have done. We've had rallies, we've had fundraisers, we've had large gatherings. We created posters. We'll show you this now. Here's one of our posters. that shows the area. You probably can't see it where you're at, but it shows the area around a city called Winooski, which is up at the northwestern end, and then the surrounding areas. The runway and the airport goes right to the city of South Burlington. And so we produced that to show the impact of the F-35 noise-wise. By the way, the Air Force says the noise of the F-35 would affect almost 7,000 people in our area. The two other bases they considered, the impact would be 100 or so people. Here's another poster of an ad we actually took up. We blew up into a poster, and if you can't see, the title is "How Would You Spend $1.4 Trillion?" That's what the F-35 will cost in its lifespan. And I don't know if you can see it, but we cite some of the things that Carol has mentioned. After 14 years in development and testing, it still can't support ground troops. It can't defend itself from air or ground strikes. It can't hide from enemies. It uses outdated stealth technology. It can't fly in the rain or near thunderstorms. Senator John McCain is calling the F-35 a scandal and a tragedy and the worst example of the military-industrial complex. And then we show on the other side what $1.4 trillion could be spent on, and it would pay for all veterans care for 5 million veterans for 32 years, or pay off all of the student debt for 37 million Americans, and repair all of our infrastructure across the United States. So, and then lastly, we produced this poster too. It was a takeoff on some of the tourist advertisements you often see, come to Vermont. This one says, "Welcome to Vermont. Enjoy our new fall colors, gray and black." And there's pictures of the F-35 flying over the scenic mountains of Vermont. So that's a little of what we have done in Vermont over the last 3 or 4 years. And now, since we were unsuccessful in getting our politicians to support the people who are affected, and by the way, the people who are affected are generally people of low to moderate income, people of color. These are the people that live around the airport and will be most egregiously affected. Even the Air Force had to report in their environmental impact statement that minorities and people of low income are disproportionately affected by the basing of the F-35. So regrettably, our politicians did not speak up for us, so we're speaking up for ourselves. So we'd be happy to take any questions, if anybody has any. One last aspect of our lawsuit. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit are some of the people that the city of Winooski, the city is the most impacted by the current F-16 and the F-35s, are going to be debating whether they will join our lawsuit. We expect them to vote on that this coming Monday, whether they'll join our federal lawsuit. That would be a city joining the plaintiffs.
And then we had.
Yes, and one other thing too, you may not be aware of. We have been in the, as Carol had mentioned, you're in the media in Japan. We did have a film crew from the Netherlands fly out here about a year ago or so, to maybe 2 years, because their country was debating buying the F-35. So we were on TV in the Netherlands. We also were on the front page of the Boston Globe, and the focus of that study was on, they called it fudging. It's the nicest word, perhaps. The people behind the scenes, our politicians, worked out deals, and our military worked out deals to bring the F-35 here. We were in the New York Times. We were in the Harper's blog and Vanity Fair. We were in a number of things. But next month, we are supposed to be on Al Jazeera America. They have a format somewhat like 60 Minutes. They came up here in January and filmed us for 2 days. They did a report on the F-35, and their focus of their report is on the safety of the weapon system. They reported on that in March, the safety in general, and they expect to air their time up here with us in May about the safety implications of the F-35 in our area.
Okay.
Great. You know, I did see one hand, but my sense is that this is probably not the best time to go into question and answer.
Okay.
Or folks may never get through all of the presentations. As I'm looking at the agenda, there's a lunch break for caucusing, and I don't know the extent to which some of this online stuff might still be going on and people might be available to talk, but that may be another question. So thank you, Roseanne. I'm going to watch the... And is it possible to keep all of this up so that you folks can...
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay. The next then is Ruth Hamilton from Save the Bear Mountains, New Mexico.
Good morning. I want to give a little more background on what we consider a big success in North Carolina. This was a t-shirt that I designed and we distributed to people in the Chapel Hill, Durham, North Carolina area because the people down in Washington County were supposed to have huge landing, what's called OLFs, outlying landing fields, put very near a school, and the fight had started by the Navy in 2006. They had come in and bought land and terrorized the people, actually, by putting them on buses and telling them what was going to happen, and collecting lots of land. In the fifth poorest state in North Carolina, that is Washington County. Okay, so when I went down to see what was going on, there were basically two ladies trying to fight off the Navy. They were coordinating everything. And it had been going on a while, but it was, they did a good job. They got that fabulous film that we saw last night made, and it was long, so it was the part that you saw was 10 minutes. And that was basically our fighting tool. Now, what you have to keep in mind is that this being a birding preserve, there are people around who we may not want to associate with. They're in the NRA and they're Ducks Unlimited, but they became our allies because they didn't want those birds killed or harmed in any way because they wouldn't have anything to shoot. So we all work together on this. And I think we all have to consider that anybody can be our ally, and we have to listen to them. Because in the end, Elizabeth Dole was not reelected because the NRA did not get behind her, one of the reasons, and she was a fence sitter, and she didn't want anything to do with this, keeping the Navy out of the birding preserve. So in 2011, David Price was on the military appropriations. They pulled the funding, and the Navy left North Carolina at that place in Washington County, and they took their little butts back to Virginia Beach. And those people around who were very wealthy had to put up the noise at that time. That's why they came to North Carolina, halfway between Cherry Point and Virginia Beach. So the fight took over 5 years. And I went to all the naval hearings and I read a letter from Chapel Hill Friends meeting. So consider that everybody needs to be involved, no matter what political party they come from. Now, here I come to New Mexico thinking I'm getting away from all that all that corruption and fighting in North Carolina. So we buy some land online. I'd never even seen it before, but it was a good deal and a very beautiful area in the Magdalena Ranger District. This is Cibolo Forest. And about 5 years after we've had this land and built our little dream retirement house, we find out that we are cited on, have 3 helicopter pads put in, and that the Air Force is up for renewal of a 30-year forestry permit. Oh boy, did I have a fight on my hands. I got very involved when I heard about a rancher who'd had his cow die from eating parachute materials. Now, this is a picture of what's hanging all over the trees on the east side of Bears, if you can zoom to it. But this is a parachute, so cows will eat anything. And Johnny Kranitz came to the open house that Elaine Corman arranged. He brought his cattle hauler, and he came up, a little bitty guy with a cowboy hat on, and he told this story. And this is a time that we had a surprise attack. Elaine had decided, now she's the one person that's going to make the decision on this. She had decided, well, we're just going to have a little open house, and you can go around and talk to these guys, these Air Force guys, and ask them questions. Well, we were there prepared with huge list of questions, and we took over somewhat and confronted her with questions. And this is what we're talking about. They're expecting people, ranchers, to read this and make a comment with a letter and send it in. Do you know, nobody in the Air Force had ever read this. They were aware of it. They didn't know any answers to their questions, and they said, well, this is the worst case scenario. Well, they had not met this lady named Arian Pregetzer. I'm so sorry she's not here, but she is brilliant, and she prepared this, all these questions, all these ways that this contracted out draft was wrong, and we presented it. We got as many letters in as we could. You know, they give us a little comment period. They'll let you know about 1 week ahead of time when there's a comment period, when you can come out and make a comment. So 10 of us gathered the trash from the site on the east side of the Bears. We took our movie. We had our presentation. We went to the Forestry Service. Do you know, Elaine was not there. She sent her crew there. It was some flu season, and I guess she had a bellyache or something. But anyway, we presented our evidence, and at this point, there's a big standstill going on. We've asked for an environmental impact statement. We have told they'll let us know something in August. Judy Coleman of the New Mexico Wilderness Alliance is ready to take the master agreement, and we hope to have a lawsuit come forward. But we're just stalled at this point, and don't know what's going to happen. But I can say that we've fought the good fight, and we've gone to the people and taken our laptops out on the ranches, and we've written letters and done the best we can, but this period now of not knowing what's going to happen until August is difficult, but we will keep up the fight. Thank you.
I'm sort of happy and dismayed to learn what's happening in my own state, some of the things that I don't know about. The next is Emily Stolarczyk from the IAC Preservation Council.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
How can I change my
Sorry,
slides?
Emily.
You gesture at me, and I'll change the slides for you.
Oh, okay.
She's coming up.
Sorry, 1 second. Looking for my laser pointer.
We don't have her. Do you have hers?
No, I didn't know.
She gave it to me.
Yeah, it looks like a tiny little.
Oh, there we go.
Got it. There we go.
We're good.
Yeah, but you're gonna, I have a lot of text in mine, so it's
Okay.
definitely gonna have to move forward, or,
You could move that table.
You want another table in there?
There you go.
Okay,
Here.
that's, wait, oh, wait.
No, I've got a.
Yeah, why don't we bring that little table and put it in front, and then we can move it.
I think we did sort of have it there.
That's
Yeah.
probably good.
You have to lift it up.
Whoa.
Where's
That looks
those,
pretty good.
where's that backup camera?
Let me go in. Okay, so you can sit at this and give your presentation. If you like.
Okay, yeah, I would, unless, I thought I'd have like a wireless mouse or something to be able to change it. Or wait, I can stand. I mean, how am I going to?
You can stand up there and gesture me, but you were going to look at your notes, essentially. You figured you'd have your own laptop.
Yeah, I guess I'll just signal you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah, we need to,
All right.
sorry, everybody. Give us just a second here.
Thanks for the salmon.
Can I stand? What's that?
Okay. Yes, okay. All right. Okay. All right. So, hi everybody. My name is Emily Stolarczyk. I am coming here from Cordova, Alaska, to talk to you about what the Navy has planned for their training activities, kind of in our front yard. It's about 20 miles from my community. And I really appreciate that I'm talking to an extremely knowledgeable crowd on this. So this is, hopefully some of what I'm saying makes a lot of sense. I think it will for everybody. Anyway, I'm the program manager for a nonprofit called the EAC Preservation Council. I have been working on this for 6 months. First found out about the Navy coming to town when literally they came to town September 12th of 2014, and they had a public meeting. They were, as part of their NEPA process, they were required to do these public meetings, and of course they had all this flashy material, and I'm very sad to say that of my community of about 2,000 people, there were only 4 people in attendance of this public meeting. Myself and my partner, who's a commercial fisherman, were half of the attendance. And this was for a public comment period that was going on for trainings for the next 5 years. So kind of since then, I have taken this and ran with it. So I'm going to do my best to keep it short. I'll talk really fast.
but Alaska's big, so you get a little.
Okay, great. All of the information in my slideshow, all of the numbers, everything from that is from the Navy's EIS, so I know you'll all understand that. And when it talks about, when in Alaska, where we have a very heavy, very involved military presence, and it's been like that for a long time, not that long, but in recent history, that the Navy has done periodic trainings before, and that's what they're kind of falling back on, is that just the hope people will say, oh, they've done this before, it's no big deal. And that's exactly what people are saying. However, this, what they're talking about doing, is brand new, has never been done before. And where I'm coming from, some of you may know, this is where the Exxon Valdez oil spill happened 26 years ago. So this area has not recovered from the oil spill, certain parts of this area. So, and I'm also very honored to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carol. Okay, you can, go back 1 second. Sorry, go back. Okay, so what this is basically trainings to maintain military readiness. Okay, now you can go. All right, so their proposed alternative was not changed from their two things. The training that they're doing in 2015, where they start dropping the bombs in June, this was permitted in 2011, but it's never happened before. Also, right now, they're having a supplemental EIS going on, so that has to do only with marine mammals, and it's for 2016 to 2021. So it's kind of two separate things going on, but they haven't changed anything. They haven't changed their ask. So what they were permitted in 2011 was this right here. It's their preferred alternative. The no action was everything that would happen before 2011. So it's all the old stuff. So now they're going to do this a lot more. And so they can actually train for up to 42 days per summer, April to October. That's during fishing season. They can do 2 separate 21-day trainings, and so they get basically all of this doubled. They get to do an additional carrier strike group, and so a SYNC-X exercise where they blow up a big ship, bomb, missiles, all that stuff, sonar. And so the big difference between what's ever been done before and what's going to happen in 2015 is the use of sonar, active and passive sonar. We've never had that happen on this large of scale in the area I'm talking about. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so this is the training area, and after I'm done, maybe at some point I have maps, I have some materials if anybody wants it. So this is their training area. This is an extremely large area. This is the community that I live in. This is Cordova. This is home of the Copper River and Copper River salmon, some of the salmon that you guys all had this morning. All of these areas are commercial fishing. This is the commercial fishing is the largest private sector employer of the state of Alaska. Gives about 80,000 people jobs. This water here in the Gulf of Alaska is the most nutrient-rich and oldest water in the world. And that's where they want to do this. So the training area is 20 to 24 nautical miles from most coastline. It's 12 miles from the nearest point of land, which is right here, which is Middleton Island. The black and white dash that you see, that's that 12-mile limit. That 12-mile limit is really important because EPA's laws only extend 12 miles from land about ocean dumping. So they go basically as close as they can, and then they begin their trainings. So this area is huge, 300 by 150 nautical miles, and it's over 42,000 nautical miles squared, surface and subsurface of water. So it's a huge area. The places where they'll be training is classified. I've talked to just about everybody I could possibly talk to, and it's classified. We will never know where they will be. So if we want to drive boats and do a protest out there, we won't know. Okay, next slide, please.
That's okay. Yeah.
Are we good?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. So this is a map that shows, this is the same map that I just showed you, but this shows our protected marine environment. So the whole light blue, all the light blue that you see is actually supposedly protected by NOAA. The permits to be able to do these trainings the Navy has, they're actually given by NOAA and NMFS, the National Marine Fisheries Service. So there's that. So the green areas are all state protected marine areas, so they're going to be bombing in there.
Then I guess show them.
We have these seamounts that they're called habitat areas of Pacific concern. So they're extremely important habitats for many marine creatures. So I just wanted you to show that. Next slide, please. So the TMMA, or TMAA, the Temporary Maritime Activities Area, that's the name of that map. It falls within the Alaska Current System, and I'm not going to delve into this so much, except for, like Carol was saying, they're talking about this one area. Well, you're taking like a square and putting it over water. There's a current system. There are weather systems. This is not just going to stay where it's at. It's going to go everywhere. And the way that it spins in the Gulf of Alaska, all of this stuff that they leave in the water is going to come right to where I live and right to where all of our commercial fisheries are, and subsistence fisheries. And so the currents are also really important for the transportation of eggs and larvae and fish and basically entire food web. And so it matters. And so when the Navy says, well, these trainings aren't going to be a big deal because all of our expended materials are dispersed over a large area. It doesn't really comfort me much. And so in this area, which some people would just consider it's dead ocean, you know, there's actually 383 species that have their predominant ecosystems in this area. Next slide, please. The why of the where, you don't really have to read all that. So one of the first things that people want to know is, why is it so close to land? Why can't they take it 200 miles out to sea? The short answer is that if it's close to land, it's cheaper and it's easier to get their planes back and forth to the bases in Anchorage and around Anchorage. So these trainings are actually, I'm just focused on the Navy part. They're actually combined trainings, which constitute the largest training area in the Pacific. So there will be Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, state agencies, federal agencies, other countries coming to take part in these war games.
So, excuse me, just checking things. Let's go back. You need the next
They
slide?
also want to train, not quite yet. They also want to train in this. This is the continental shelf, so there's a lot of variances in the depth of the water. They say that they need to train there because they need the different depths for their submarines and things like that. So while it is incredibly important to nature and humans, it's really important for the Navy to be able to go use sonar there. Next slide, please. Government-to-government consultation. So the way that our tribal system works in Alaska is vastly different than anywhere else. But basically, all of our federally recognized tribal villages were offered consultations when this was going on. They started contacting them in 2008. Every single regional tribe signed off on their right to consultation because not a single one of them understood what they were signing. 9 of them didn't even respond. And the Navy just said, don't worry, we're doing some trainings, no big deal. And so we're talking about people that have rights to their subsistence harvest, people that have been fishing or practicing their lifestyle for thousands of years. Every single one of them signed off. Eyak is the native village in the town where I live, where the guy wrote a really great letter saying that he wasn't really sure if this was a good idea, but oh, by the way, if the Navy could please keep him updated on if there was any opportunities for employment, that'd be great. These native tribes and these native corporations, they do a lot of very scary military contracting. So it's incredibly complex, and a lot of people say, like, oh, the tribes have rights and the tribes have sovereignty. They don't. And the people that are running those tribes are often very corrupt. And so it's very difficult. But I will say tribal consultations, government-to-government consultations in other places, like on the West Coast, they're winning. And this is a very successful delay tactic that other people are using to hold off Navy trainings. Next. Oh, and regulatory agency. Okay, so we're not going to get any help from any of these at all. None. It's out of their water, their jurisdiction extends 3 miles from shore, so there's not going to be any agency that can help us at all. So that's another thing. And our Coastal Zone Management Act actually expired a couple years ago, and the state of Alaska has not redone it. So it's just, we don't have one anymore. Next slide, please. So one of the things, aside from the noise and aside from the sonar, one of the things that we're really concerned about is the expended materials. All of the garbage that's left over after the bombs and the missiles and the torpedoes are gone. So this is everything that they use. It's all live, it's all real, it's the same stuff we use in war. So the heavy metals, this is all what it's from, this is all what it is. And they know that our fish are going to be exposed to this. It says it right in their EIS, that there's a high risk for chemical exposure to fish. Do you eat wild salmon or wild fish from Alaska? It just happens to provide most of the sockeye salmon in the country, 99%. And then there's also this big problem of propellants. And this solid grain propellant, this is coming out of all that stuff and it goes right into the water and it'll be dispersed over a large area. The Navy will actually say, well, it's no big deal because it's dispersed over a large area. Or a lot of it'll burn off as soon as it goes in the atmosphere, a lot of it'll burn off or it'll evaporate. But we actually know when you look at jet fuel and things like that. That's not the case. So also not very comforting. And then these things like benzene, toluene, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, they all cause cancer. We have a lot of people now that are getting sick that actually went out and tried to clean up the oil in the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and they're sick now. They have COPD, they have tumors on their kidneys because they were exposed to all of this. And now we're saying, let's take the cleanest water in the world and put this in it annually and not clean it up. Next, please. Here's a laundry list of everything that will be in the water from these expended materials. And this is what the Navy says will happen. They'll either burn, or they'll sink, or they'll be dispersed in the current system. But it's no big deal because they'll sink. They also say that they can be mistaken for prey by a multitude of species, including salmon. And just from doing this one time, that's going to happen in June, 20% of that map I showed you could be polluted, or 8,400 nautical miles squared. So it's quite a large area. They weren't kidding when they said a large area. Next, please. This is just kind of a chart. This is right out of their EIS that shows the number of the weapons that they'll use. So this is alternative 2. This is the no action alternative. This is an increase underneath alternative 2. So that no action alternative, that's all pre-2011. So yes, they have done these periodic trainings before. So we're talking about up to 360 bombs and so on. And this is the amount of pounds, 352,000 pounds a year in the water. And of that, the stuff that's hazardous, the lead, cadmium, and everything like that, over 10,000 pounds of hazardous materials. And now this is up to. They may not drop 360 bombs, but they're allowed to. But they're not going to tell us how many they do. This huge increase right here, 6,500%, this is the use of sonobuoys, and that's associated with sonar that have never been used before. So when I tell people, yes, they've done trainings, no, they've never done this, here it is in black and white, how much this is an increase. Next, please. Just a little word about cyanide. The EPA says cyanide is not normally present in seawater, so they've said a safe amount is 1 part per billion. Well, when these Mk-48 torpedoes are discharged and left into the water, the cyanide that comes off of them will be 140 to 150 parts per billion. So 140 to 150 times the EPA is safe. It says it's safe. You can go next. All right, so most of what I talk about is fish, because that's the community I'm from, that's our way of life. The one I've adopted because I'm not from there, but we eat and breathe and live and die by the salmon. It is our way of life. It is our culture, it is our tradition, it is our source of economic income, it is everything. But that's just tiny, those sort of fishing communities. A lot of people are concerned about how this affects marine life or marine mammals. And a lot of the court cases that are heard their successes are because of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Salmon and our healthy runs have zero protection because we don't protect species of fish runs until they're endangered. So when you have something that's perfect and sustainable, they don't protect it at all. There's absolutely no protections in place for that. But the marine mammals, they know that they have some protection for. So this is kind of just a list of everything that has essential habitat in that area. So takes. Level B and level A takes. Level A takes are outright death, like we blow them up, they die right away. Level B takes are where they can actually disrupt the Navy and the use of sonar and their exercises can disrupt an essential life behavior. Surfacing, nursing, migrating, breeding, feeding. So things that don't outright kill them, but they die at some point. So over a 5-year period, it'll be 182,000 marine mammal takes in this area, at least. And this is just what the Navy tells us. So I'm going to warn you, the next couple of slides are pretty graphic, but I did think that they were important to show. So you can just go, they're 3, so just kind of go through them before you switch to it though. This happened 1 year ago. This was April of 2014. These pictures I'm going to show you. This was from combined training off the island of Crete in the Mediterranean last year. So it's not like these are old pictures. No, this is less than a year ago. So next slide, please. That's a fetus of a whale that was killed because of sonar. And you can go to the next one. They had 14 of these whales wash up on this little beach last year, and this was all caused by the Navy sonar. Next one. And that's what happens, it blows up their ears. And it's important to note that whatever happens to whales will happen to fish, it will happen to humans. A lot of times, sometimes fishermen in our area, you can go to the next one so you guys don't have to look at that. Fishermen in our area, sometimes they actually compete with the whales, because you can do things like have a whale go through your fishing net, and that's bad because that's cost you thousands of dollars. And you have maybe 12 hours to fish to make your money. So it's sometimes the whale part doesn't really pull on the heartstrings of the fishermen like I need it to, but I know it does that in other people. So that's why I show those. So I'm sorry, but that's the reality of the situation. That's what it looks like.
And Emily just said it's been about 20 minutes. But
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna go. Wow, we're like 20 minutes. All right.
I think people probably want you to keep going.
Okay, so the environmental effects of these trainings on fish. They have an idea of what they will do, and basically this just says that warfare is stressful to fish populations. That's basically what all of that says. So the exposure to chemical byproducts, the disturbance, the injury from the death and the pressure of the shock waves, it's all bad. You can go to the next one. So in reference to sonar, pretty much this all says that no studies have been done. Not a single study has been done, ever, that will talk about sonar in fish and where I live. And they don't have these studies, because if they did have these studies, they would show that it would be bad. So if they had these studies, I could walk into a court and I could say, look, I'm proving the likelihood of harm here, but I don't have them. So I can't prove the likelihood of harm. So it's, no small stroke of genius on the Navy's part that they don't have any studies on this. They have studies that will show what it'll do to whales and marine mammals, but not a single one on fish. Next, please. You can go next. Okay, when we're talking about EFH is essential fish habitat. So this is an area that's essential fish habitat. It's really important. They need it or they will die. So these are all some of the species and the different lives. This is out of their EIS. This is the different stages of life that have essential fish habitat in this area that's to be bombed. So some of that you guys have probably had: rockfish, cod, sole, really important. You can go to the next one. This one is extremely important. So this is salmon. All 5 species of Pacific salmon have essential fish habitat in this area that's going to be bombed. We have the maturing juveniles and everything, so they think that possibly these trainings could stop them from maturing. Okay, so we have the fish that are growing up, they're getting all that nice fat and all that flavor that's so delicious. Well, now they're going to be doing that, but swimming around in water that's got lead and cyanide and everything in it. And we're also having a huge problem with, if anybody knows, with the Chinook, the king salmon. The numbers are plummeting statewide. And it's a huge, huge problem I could talk a long time about, but there's no protections in place. So I'm just about done here. Next. All right, almost done. So when the Navy did this EIS last time, the NIMS, the National Marine Fisheries Service, actually found that they disagreed, because the Navy, no surprise, said, we don't see any significant negative impacts. This is not going to be a problem. You're fine. Okay. Well, NIMS actually disagreed, and they made 4 conservation recommendations. Basically, move it, develop a long-term monitoring plan, stop displacing the research vessels, and count the number of fish that you kill. The Navy said, no, no, sure, no. And when I talk to NIMS, NIMS just does this. It happens. We're a cooperating agency. That's all they say. So, yeah, it sucks. Next, please. When I sue, this will be what I use, the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Conservation and Management Act. Next. All right, so this is not a complete list. I'm learning more all the time, but there are people in other places that are speaking up about this, and they're trying to stop it from happening. So I've been talking to the Conservation Council of Hawaii, both Earth Justice and NRDC. And so this is really huge. A federal judge, and this is having to do with marine mammals, but it's the same thing. A federal judge just handed down, and I think the press releases were from like April 7th, that NIMS actually violated federal laws in place when they granted the permits for these marine mammal takes for these exact same trainings that happened between Southern California and Hawaii. So right now NRDC and Earth Justice, they're going, I don't know what's the best way to deal with this. We didn't think we would win, but they won. They won across the board. And so then VA case in Puerto Rico, I think a lot of people here probably know about that. And then the Winters case. So the Winters case is really interesting because the Navy won, but it set a precedent of public interest. And that's what I'm doing. I'm here representing the public interest. This is really interesting. Gulf of Alaska in 2012. So when I mentioned that these trainings hadn't happened before, they hadn't happened because of the settlement agreement. NRDC and a group called Center for Biological Diversity got together and they threatened to sue the Navy. And what happened was they signed a settlement agreement that said that the Navy had to spend a lot more money to research how these trainings were going to affect marine mammals. And they did. And it held off the trainings in 2012 and 2013. They didn't happen in 2014 because of the sequestration. They didn't have the money. So there's this huge push to do this right now in 2015 to open the door to be able to do this in the Gulf of Alaska for the next 20 years. And so this is what I'm saying. And then the Sinkion. And of course, this case was not public. No one in Alaska even knows about this. No one in Alaska even knows I'm here right now. Very few people. So next. Okay, so what am I doing? And this took me a while to figure out. While I've been working on this for a while, I didn't really understand or could even really get what I should do. So here I can give this information to you. I can make you really upset and really sad, bum you out real hard. But what can I do to fix it? So we can litigate. Unfortunately, I just learned that it's not an option for 2015. We don't have time. I will never have an assessment done. I can't get an injunction. A judge won't hear it. Alaska's a hard state for this kind of stuff. So basically, I have to resort to activism. And so what that means is that these public letters, and so I know that talking to our politicians may not work. I'm hoping it works. So just the day before yesterday, before I got on a plane to come here, I finally got form letters up on my website, and I have copies, that you can actually go on, anyone can, and send a letter. You can customize it, and it goes directly to the governor and the lieutenant governor and both of the senators for Alaska. There's another letter that actually goes right to, and this took some finagling, the Chief of Naval Command. I jumped through some hoops and I was able to get his personal email. So it goes to him and the commander of the Pacific Fleet. And basically what I'm trying to say is please don't use live ordnance or sonar in the Gulf of Alaska. Many people have told me I will fail. I'm not going to be successful. But I can't stop anyway, because if I do nothing, the bombs drop in June. And if I do everything, maybe they still drop. But at least I can put it on some radars. Maybe they drop this June, but they don't drop for the next 20 years. I don't know. It's all new. It's all brand new. All right, and so I'm going also to the media. So I'm kind of launching, and I say me because kind of right now it is me. I don't want it to be me. I'm here hoping that other people will help me. But Alaska's a tough state for this to sell in. Really tough. All right, and then what we're going to be doing is a sustained public outreach campaign. So it hasn't been done before. However, in Alaska, we do have quite a bit of angles that we can work. We have, the organization I work for, we have a pretty strong history of direct nonviolent action. We've stopped some things all before my time. We have the Exxon Valdez oil spill, that these areas that these Gulf of Alaska, waters feed into are not recovered from the Gulf of Alaska oil spill. There we have the Copper River salmon brand and king salmon habitat. Okay, you can go to the next one. To send a letter, go here. I also have a sign-in sheet. And I have this for people. And last one. All right, I know we don't have time for questions anyway, but that's my email address. If you want to read the EIS, the Navy's EIS, it's goaeis.com. It's all on there. Be prepared to dig. You can stay involved by liking us on Facebook and joining our mailing list, and I feel like this is really important because most people ask me, do you really think that you can stop it? And I say, yeah, I do. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
well worth the time. It may put us behind a little bit, but that was well worth the time expended. The next is also from Alaska, Rob Mulford. Is he here or is he
Let me
by
see.
electronic means?
By phone? He was on earlier, but he's not on now.
Should we move on to the next one and then continue? Dory from New Mexico, Holloman Air Force Base.
We have Karen Sullivan.
Okay, so Karen
Okay.
is coming up, so we'll just keep moving.
Go down to there.
And we have James Mark Leas. James Mark Leas? I don't
And
know.
who is he with?
He may still be part of Roseanne Greco's group. They
okay.
had two people
Okay.
loved
How
him.
about
So
Karen?
we're on to Kathleen Williamson.
Oh, Kathleen. All right.
Yeah, and we're actually pretty
Tucson
close to
forward.
on time.
We are.
Okay, has anybody got to take a pee-pee break? We good?
People are going on their own.
I went on my own. Okay. I didn't know who was going to be pushing the buttons, and
So you have.
so I'll just do the same thing. I'll ask you to advance the slide. if you can.
Oh, okay. She's doing a presentation? Okay.
Yes.
Can you just put this here for me? Is that right? While we're waiting for that to come up, don't start my clock yet, Peggy, because
Not until
Wait, I'm just
Tucson
filling. This is the most recent newspaper article in Tucson about an effort that Tucson Forward, it's something we accomplished last year. We sent out a really great objective survey to 4,000 households, randomly selected within the areas of Tucson, because our fight is right in central Tucson, in urban Tucson. We got some pretty interesting results out of that, but it's just a great survey. But the only media that would really pick it up was our local alternative Tucson Weekly. Daily Star is pretty much it's owned by this group called the Davis Month and 50 and all their business interests and politicians. Okay, so let me get going here. So this is a map of southern Arizona with the southern half of Arizona is filled with bombing ranges and military operating areas, MOAs, where the Air Force can practice bombing and strafing. In this map, Phoenix is near the center, and Tucson is southeast of Phoenix. The orange areas are Indian reservations, and all other colored areas and all crosshatched areas are bombing ranges and MOAs. And if you'll note how the majority of Indian reservations are overlaid with the MOAs, and I can tell you that some of those pilots really abuse the folks out of Tohono O'odham and like terrorizing school buses with all their practices with their F-16s and so forth. I hear about it all the time. To take advantage of this vast expanse that's open to bombing and strafing, the Air Force has two large bases here. There's Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, which was actually missing in that map that you showed earlier of the air. Luke is huge. I couldn't believe it wasn't on
There's
there.
one in Wyoming
Yes.
missing also.
Yeah, and Davis Monthan Air Force Base, which is in Tucson. The next slide. This is the map of southern Tucson, and in Tucson, the Davis Monthan Air Force Base, or DM as we call it, is very close to our residential areas. Now, Gary wrote very close. It's actually pretty much in central Tucson now because there's been so much expansion all around it. And they fly over the downtown area all the time, in South Tucson all the time. It's over our most populated areas. As aircraft arrive and depart its runways, which is shown in black here, they fly low over our homes, our businesses, and our schools, and several schools have had to shut down, including Julia Keene School had to shut down because of the aircraft. Our civilian airport, the Tucson International Airport, with its runway shown in blue, is less than 5 miles from DM, and that's a problem because military aircraft from DM mix with the commercial airliners and other civilian aircraft from TIA. This is contrary to FAA regulations, but the FAA has given special dispensation for the two runways to coexist so closely together. The next one. Okay, there's an A-10 flying out of Tucson, out of DM in the lower corner there. Most of the DM aircraft, where am I? A-10, right. Most of the DM aircraft that fly low over our residences are A-10 fighters. If you're in the DM flight path, you're going to most of the time get A-10s, but they host all kinds of stuff. Fortunately, the A-10 is the quietest fighter jet in the Air Force arsenal, and for most Tucsonans, its noise is almost tolerable, depending on where you live in relation to the flight path. The Air Force used to be more disciplined about keeping this in the flight path. Now they just fly wherever they want. It's an American twin-engine, straight-wing jet aircraft developed by Fairchild Republic in the early 70s. And one of the nice things also that makes the A-10 a little more tolerable than everything else we're getting now is that it's a twin-engine plane, which is so much safer. The next image is C-130. We have a lot of those also, and they're almost like practically benign compared to the stuff we're getting. I have to tell you, those of you who complain about C-130s, they're like just little low Hummers in the sky, basically, at this point. So they also fly a lot of those cargo planes. And then we also get the HH-60 military helicopters over residential Tucson. Next slide. Now these are F-16s, and I picked a bunch of pictures of F-16s, and you can kind of flick through those as I'm talking about the F-16s. I picked more than just pictures of them flying over Tucson because I knew that we were forming an alliance here, and I just wanted to kind of give a sense of how many places they're flying over. So DM is the home to what's called Operation Noble Eagle. Noble Eagle has several F-16s whose purpose is to protect Tucson from attacks by enemy aircraft. Just in case the Chinese want to come and bomb our Walmarts, we're ready for them. F-16s are twice as loud as A-10s, and their noise is tolerable. They're loud. I moved from the DM flight path, which is I lived right near the University of Arizona, which predates the base by many decades. I moved out of that path after 20 years of putting up with the A-10s and all their other tornadoes and so forth that they host. And I moved to another neighborhood out by A Mountain, which is still downtown, but and then I went into the frying pan with the F-16s from Tucson International Airport. And I'll tell you, 2 days ago, working in my office, I have a home office, I was in tears by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was just like a psychological mess because the F-16s were they were hosting some group from Texas, it was just insane. Anyway, they're very loud, and they're not tolerable to most Tucson residents. And even worse, when DM suspects enemy aircraft are approaching Tucson, which is several times a month, the Operation Noble Eagle F-16s scramble. They fly low over our homes with their afterburners on, and afterburners are just insane. And my mother ran out of the house one day. She thought something blew up inside the house. She was so terrified by these F-16s over the house. Okay, so you can just kind of flip through these F-16s. There's Alaska. And thanks for that great salmon. Very persuasive to protect our fish. Then you can flip forward to the Tornado. Those are these. This is an interesting thing that's coming up. The unmanned F-16. I found that when I was looking for pictures of the F-16 online. And then let me just double check where I'm at with these slides.
Here's the tornadoes.
There's the tornadoes? Okay. We get those too. So another operation used at DM is the Total Forces Training. TFT brings in fighter jets from all over the U.S. and several foreign countries to practice bombing and strafing in southern Arizona. And these include the A-10s, F-16s, foreign aircraft such as Tornadoes and Typhoons. They're very loud. Next image. Okay, and then we also are famous for our boneyard, which is a big tourist site, according to a lot of people. People that, fetishize military. So what's in our future? At DM, the Air Force intends to scrap all the relatively quiet A-10s, that's a new battle going on, within the next 2 or 3 years and replace them with F-16s, which are much louder. And as we all know, the F-16s are slated to be replaced by F-35s. And DM is currently expanding its Total Forces Training program. There's an environmental assessment that came through a while back. They've withdrawn it now because there were so many complaints, but they're redoing it. They're basically making it worse. And they're adding, we just got a new supplement that we're supposed to respond to by May 5th to this EA. They're going to add all these helicopter pads all over southern Arizona. And so we've been hearing more about all these helicopter pads. And the Ruth's presentation last night was very moving, I thought. DM's expanding. They want to double the amount of flights. They want to bring in additional aircraft such as F-18s and F-22s regularly to DM. And they want to add night flights. And of course, they're mission creeping to the F-35 in this, which is 8 times louder than at their original estimates. They kind of backpedaled a little bit on it, but their original estimates in their EA was 8 times louder. So that's what's on the table right now, and they had a finding of no significant impact. Doubling what we have now, adding night flights, and then adding all of these much louder planes over a very, very densely populated urban population. No significant impact. So the next image. Here's the F-35, which is currently at Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, and I am really surprised that there isn't a group from Luke. I mean, we've got when we first started 10 or 12 years ago, we started getting this thing going in Tucson. Luke people were coming down to talk to us, but I think we need to do a better job at reaching out up there and trying to, work together and inspire more people to step up. So that's the replacement that's coming in. In their environmental assessment, as the F-35 starts to replace the F-16, they're going to start housing them at Tucson International Airport. They're going to bring in, I think, the lowest estimate they want to bring in is like 72 of these ultimately, and that's their first easygoing alternative. And in the words of their own environmental assessment, this would make the homes of more than 8,000 Tucson residents not compatible with residential use. And that's a finding with no significant impact. And of course, most of those people are in South Tucson, and they are, poor.
Not the 1%.
Right. No, they're not the 1%. Okay, so next one. Did we miss the drone? Was there a drone picture there? Okay, someplace in here there's a picture of drones. We've got a drone unit, and I'll just talk about it right now, just so that I don't mess it up. Anyway, there's drones coming up. This is a Midtown house that belonged to Linda Ronstadt. And she moved to San Francisco about 10 years ago because she was disgusted with the jets flying over her house, the C-130s and the A-10s. This is the Davis-Monthan flight path. So they're not only in the poor neighborhoods, but this used to be a very, very rich neighborhood, and the property values have gone down. I don't know if it's still on the market, but she tried to sell it recently, and it wasn't pricing it what it really should have. So pride of ownership is evaporating in Tucson. Go to the next slide. Oh, there's my little drone. This is a new mission at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. See if I get my notes on it. I didn't practice this, I apologize, but the drone issue down by where we are down at the border this is part of the Air National Guard project, and I also work in criminal defense, federal criminal defense, and so we're seeing more and more of these drones being lent out, to Border Patrol and so forth. So, and I'll tell you that in almost every big drug bust that I get, Homeland Security is one of the big law enforcement agencies, because they've changed our drug laws into narco-terrorism laws. And so this is how the mission creep is, that all this military stuff that we're looking at is really going to be pointed at American citizens. And it already is. I mean, some guy got busted for stealing a cow or something. The Border Patrol people borrowed a drone from one of the military agencies up in Dakota or something, and the drone saw that the guy had, stolen a cow from his neighbor or something. Did you see that story a while back? It was about a year ago. So anyway, it's this big mission creep going on. So let me see where we're at here. I should have practiced this. I said that the last time I did a PowerPoint. Okay, just go to the next one and see what it is. Oh, there's Lynn's house. Go to the next one.
Let's go back.
F-16s. Yeah, I think, okay, there you go. This is the article. Okay, so we had a group called the Military Community Relations Committee back when we first started squawking our first manifestation of Tucson Forward, and people started getting together and squawking. So the military came in, they were all nice, and started having meetings with us. And then somehow out of that, this military relations liaison type kind of meetings got started. And over the years, it's just been completely co-opted by Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, their liaisons and so forth. And they basically just run the show, so it's become completely ineffective. It was formally established about 7 years ago. It's supposed to bring together neighborhood associations, the business community, and the Air Force to find solutions to the problems that arise because of the friction here. And this article was published in 2009, reports that the accomplishments of the MCRC, there's been no recommendations in 2 years, and several years since the MCRC has accomplished almost nothing. It's failed because of the consensus process that was originally agreed upon. So when one person opposes a good idea, the whole idea fails. And the business community is a very forceful supporter of Davis-Monthan, and it's represented on the MCRC by Tucson Metro Chamber of Commerce and another group called the DM50. and another group called a new group called the Southern Arizona Defense Alliance. And so whenever neighborhood associations make a proposal to protect the livability of our homes, the business community vetoes it. So it only takes one vote to just veto any good idea that we come up with. You can go to the next one. And you can go to the next one. And these are some of the logos of the combined business interests and so forth that have all come together to support. And they're huge. I mean, our big car dealerships and big hotels, Tucson Association of Realtors, practically blacklisted Steve Kosachik, one of our council people, for even questioning, so unpatriotically even questioning anything about DM's activities. You go to the next one. And then they're always misreporting, let's see. They're always misreporting how much money is brought in by Davis Month, and I can't really go through that whole economic analysis with you right now, but tourism greatly exceeds it, but it just keeps getting kind of misrepresented to the basic public, and so the public sentiment, as somebody was mentioning, we have to win over the public sentiment, is completely, brainwashed and deluded about this, so it's a big problem. And, their logos are like, if you don't like it, move. We get the Sound of Freedom complaints all the time. So the business community is so eager to destroy residential property values, and we keep wondering why, because of the property tax revenues, and they claim it's because of money. They say DM brings about $1.5 billion into Tucson every year, and then to justify this claim, they cite DM's fiscal year reports. Go to the next one. So the DM's accountants created this figure of nearly $1.5 billion by adding direct economic impacts to a vague number that's called indirect impacts. And then adding the economic impacts of all military retirees in Tucson. And the Air Force regulations prohibit the base from including retirees in its calculations of economic impacts, but that doesn't stop them from misrepresenting this. The actual economic impact of DM is lower, and I'll skip over the details of that. So the one before that is just, you can't really see it well, but it's like, I just went in and started looking at what are the cheapest houses in town, and went into Zillow or Trulia or something like that. And like 95% of them are all houses that are around that are impacted, closer to the base. And, I mean, it's not surprising, but the base keeps expanding, and that low impact keeps expanding outward. It's really a tremendous drain on the economy to have this. We're losing this property tax value, and I just can't see how they don't connect the dots a little better. So we've got this whole ghetto house situation. Pretty much everything south of Broadway is practically blighted. Nobody seems to notice. Go ahead and go on to the next one. These levels, where did I put this in? This is something that the newspaper published a while ago, and it gives you another idea of some of the higher levels. I think it's kind of hard to see. You can go to the next one. And then, at the end of this thing, I started looking at, this is also like blighted areas around the Tucson International Airport. This is Tucson International Airport over here, and then this is DM over here. And it's kind of hard to see it up on here, but if this gets reproduced somehow online, if we do a website on this, you'll be able to see this slide a little bit better. And then, let's just go to the next one. Oh, I just kind of popped this up here, and it doesn't show Davis Monthan, but I know that there have been Superfund type problems around Davis Monthan. There were lawsuits years ago where people were dying of cancer because of something that happened, what Davis Monthan put in the water, and there was a plume down there. And that information, even in my memory, who's paying attention, the details of that is receded. And I was even in the home of one of the families that won some money, some petty amount of money in that lawsuit, and it's still even receded. It's so powerful, the media, and then how much information we do try to take in and keep up with. So I just pulled this off of Wikipedia and just grabbed some of the Arizona Superfund sites, and you can see all the Air Force-based Superfund sites just in Arizona. And it doesn't include Davis Monthan, which I find kind of suspicious. And so the thing is, one of the the media campaigns that we've got going here, and I think that Emily from Alaska really made a very powerful presentation about the environmental problems with this. We've labeled ourselves, and people around us have labeled ourselves as a noise fight. And even this headline, the Tucson Weekly decided to pick, this wasn't our idea, it's noise fight, noise, as if we're all just like gentle little flowers that can't take a little noise. When in fact, it's basically an economic fight, and it's very, very much an environmental fight. We are running out of water in Tucson. I would like to know how much water is Davis-Monthan sucking out of our groundwater, and what kind of plumes are going on down there. I mean, what kind of contamination is going on. This is serious, urgent business, and I think with Tucson Forward, we need to work a lot harder on this and get more education out. Just go on to the next one. This is some of the Superfund sites in the U.S., and I was thinking if we could overlap this, we'd probably see a lot of overlap with, go to the next one. You'd probably see an awful lot of overlap. Okay, go to the next one. Next one. Oh, this is part of the media campaign. The Arizona Daily Star runs this blog all the time, these reports. Every time a Davis-Monthan airman, picks up a hanky off the street, they get a big article about it, like the civilians don't do anything. You know, this guy helped somebody out of a car and he had EMT background. Can you imagine a civilian getting a headline like this? I mean, it's just appalling. And we can't even get our survey published in this newspaper, and then they publish this kind of stuff all the time. And the only way you can comment is by being on Facebook. You can't get a comment in without being on Facebook. And even though I'm on Facebook, I refuse to cooperate with that because it's really a restriction on public speech. Anyway, go to the next one. We have a great local cartoonist named David Fitzsimmons. He's a good friend of mine, and he's a fabulous artist. Anyway, this is one of his cartoons about the noise. But again, like I said, we've got to definitely move this, make noise go down to the lower part of the list. I mean, not that noise doesn't have its health effects, which we're all aware of. I don't need to go down the list. I felt it psychologically the other day myself. But anyway, go ahead, go to the next one. This is military bases in the United States. And I was shocked at what I saw in Alaska. I mean, it was like, oh my God. I mean, it's amazing. And we go to the next one. And so this is our website, TucsonForward.org. I also created a domain that's no-F35Tucson.org. So the idea is to make it into a bumper sticker, and that's all it says. No-F35-Tucson.org, and it points to our site, and then you can get, a lot of information. We have a collaboration link on here where I've started adding EB Reserve and Whitney and Vermont, people at Peaceful Skies Coalition and so forth, to really start bringing us all together. And I am so grateful that Carol and you Taos folks put this together, because this is really the next very, very necessary step. I've told my pals in Tucson for the last few years, we cannot fight this as a NIMBY. It's just completely irrelevant to fight this as a NIMBY. So there's a million things to talk about, and hopefully we'll get some more of that out this afternoon. Thanks again.
Are there any of those earlier folks on the list who will come back online?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
This is Karen
Ron
Sullivan.
Richards? Save the Olympic Peninsula.
Hi, I'm very happy that Carol Miller put this on. And,
No, Peaceful Skies.
Oh, Peaceful
I would have
Skies.
done it, any of it, really.
This is a really essential next step in what we're facing here. While I'm beginning to speak here, my wife Nina is handing out the flyer that our group has put together. And by the way, I represent Protect the Peninsula's Future, which is a longtime environmental organization on the Olympic Peninsula, and also Save the Olympic Peninsula, which is a newly formed group which is more directly associated with this electronic warfare range issue, which I'm going to talk about. We also work closely with Rick Abraham's group, Citizens of Eby's Reserve, and a couple other groups, Protect Olympic Peninsula, also known as POP, which has a very good Facebook website with a lot of the current developments on it, and West Coast Action Alliance. It was a group that we had a hand in forming, and I think later on
They're presenting later.
Karen Sullivan will say some words for them. But essentially, this all began last October for us. when a lady in Forks, Washington, which is a little town east of Port Angeles, discovered a notice in a post office, which talked about a proposal to create the Pacific Northwest Electronic Warfare Range. There had never been any newspaper advertisement about this on the Olympic Peninsula, even though the Forest Service regulations required it. Nobody knew anything about it. After this lady fretted about this for a couple of weeks, she took it to the publisher of the Forks Forum, a small town newspaper about 60 miles west of Port Angeles. And she put it on a Facebook page and got something like 4,000 hits in just a matter of days. And they went to the Forest Service and said, "What's this about? And why didn't you publish it in the local newspapers like you're supposed to?" Their response was, "We didn't think you would be interested." Well, let me tell you what this is about. The Olympic Peninsula is about 100 miles west of, the center is about 100 miles west of Seattle. We're south of Vancouver Island in British Columbia, south of the Strait of Juan de Fuca. Whidbey Island, where Rick lives, is at the east end of the Strait of Juan de Fuca, where the Strait of Juan de Fuca meets the inner Puget Sound. The electronic warfare range is essentially located across the north part of the Olympic Peninsula. And the planes from Whidbey Island will practice in this proposed warfare range. They're proposing as many as 153 of these Growler aircraft. They're EA-18Gs, loudest plane in the military. It developed as an announcement of the availability of an environmental assessment, which included only 15 sites on Olympic National Forest property where they would place mobile emitters to broadcast an electronic signal into the air. And the story was that the planes would come and try to detect that signal. There would be no attempt to jam that signal or counteract that signal, just purely detection. And nothing was going to change over what they've been doing for years. That was a story that they presented in a couple public meetings that developed after this notice was spotted. And the people started asking questions. And the Navy essentially said, well, we need to move the training from Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho over here because our crews need to spend an hour and a half a day with their families more, a couple times a week. That's number one reason. Number two reason was to save about $4 million a year in fuel costs. I've heard similar reasons offered today for other projects around the country. But there's all these common arguments you hear. And while the Navy made that argument, they totally ignored the effect of all these loud planes on Olympic National Park, which is our number one tourism, number one industry by far on the Olympic Peninsula. And they totally ignored the impact of the noise on all the people on the Olympic Peninsula. They totally just looked at their own selfish concerns, which were minor compared to what we think our concerns are. So when we looked into it more, a lot of things just didn't add up. One is there was never any study of the impact of these airplanes between Whidbey Island and the west side of the Olympic Peninsula, where we think the training range is primarily going to be located. Now, we aren't sure of that because there's no map that shows where the Pacific Northwest Electronic Warfare Range is to be situated. And we just recently have seen the reason for that, and I'll get to that later. But there was also no study of the impact of the airplanes in this electronic warfare range. The whole environmental assessment was only evaluating the impact of these mobile emitters, which are, to begin with, sort of like camper trucks with antennas on them. They're supposed to drive around the Forest Service roads and to, at different locations to see if the jets can spot them. And in the Air Force's arguments, or the Navy's arguments, they said, well, there won't be any impact from radiation because these emitters will only be directing upwards. There won't be any jamming radiation coming down. Well, the implication of that argument is that if there was to be jamming radiation coming down, there would be harm. But they led us to believe there won't be any, just pure detection. Well, we started looking closer and closer, and the whole story can sort of be told in some emails that were just made public a couple months ago, or about a month and a half ago, which were between the Forest Service and the Navy about what they really wanted to do. We found out 5 really important things from those emails. One is these 15 sites where these mobile emitters were going to go and come from and practice transmitting were only the tip of the iceberg. What the Navy really wanted to do was to drive these mobile emitters all around Olympic National Park, east side, north side, south side, west side, and use roads, I guess U.S. highways and county roads, to transmit from. In fact, these emails say this will provide really lifelike similarities to all sorts of training scenarios. And we'll pick and choose where we go to try to get as close to the real thing as we can. So suddenly, the issue wasn't these little 15 sites, but it was all around the Olympic Peninsula. And actually the first paragraph of the first email said, the reason we need this is to practice electronic attack training. We've been doing this in Mountain Home Air Force Base, and we've got to move it over here because our pilots need an hour and a half a day more with their families. So right there in black and white is the real reason for this project. It's to practice jamming these electronic, well, they're jamming stations. I mean, you know, in electronic warfare, there's ground-based radar that's trying to counteract aircraft, and then there's aircraft trying to counteract ground-based radar. So anyway, the Navy's biggest assurance was it was just going to be detection, was just right out the window. So that's 2, 1 and 2. Instead of just these 15 sites, they're going to be all around the peninsula. And 2, there's going to be electronic attack training. They also talked in these emails about wanting to use Olympic National Park roads. Park roads, not just Forest Service roads. And the fourth thing in here in these emails was a statement that the Forest Service wrote back to the Navy and said, look, we can't meet your, they made a request back in 2012 for a temporary permit. They said, we can't meet your November 1 deadline because this is going to involve low-flying aircraft. And because it involves low-flying aircraft, we're going to have to go through the NEPA procedures. Well, this was also just counter to everything the Navy had been saying. This was only going to involve aircraft at around 10,000 feet, above 10,000 feet. Well, here it is, black and white, low-flying aircraft, which isn't a real surprise, because if you look at a lot of Navy and Air Force publications, one involving the low-altitude training area, where they talk about the need to go as low as 100 feet to counteract radar stations. And then they also say, we aren't going to, these federal regulations, they say, but we're going to comply with the FAA rules, which prohibit these airplanes from coming within 500 feet of any person or building. Now, does that give all of you a lot of reassurance? So anyway, this was another little twist that we found out in these emails. But there was also a statement from the Forest Service saying, well, we'll give you some tips on how to shape your application to avoid regulatory pitfalls. And so lo and behold, after those emails, we never heard anything about low-flying aircraft. We never heard anything about electronic attack. It was all high-flying aircraft. So anyway, that's from the record. Basically, we have an EA that says nothing about the effect of the aircraft on the Olympic Peninsula. Am I running out of time? Okay. We have endangered marbled murrelets, which is a very interesting and rare seabird. We have endangered spotted owls, which is a marker species for the whole environment. Off the coast, we have endangered sea lions. We have endangered orca whales. Anyway, no discussion about this electronic warfare range and the aircraft in this environmental impact statement. And that's despite this 1988 master agreement between the Department of Defense and the Department of Agriculture, which is where the Forest Service is, that requires three things: that the DoD show there's no other available property, which was really tough here because this was a transfer of training from Mountain Home Air Force Base. They're already doing it there. They can continue doing it there. It also says you have to study the impacts of any related aircraft. Just says it black and white in this document. And it also says it has to be consistent with the Forest Management Act for the region. Simply isn't consistent. So they were just blatantly violating all these provisions in the master agreement. And the Forest Service, by the way, had the gall to tell us that the master agreement allowed this. And that was before anybody had ever heard about the master agreement. No one read it, and it was just an outright misrepresentation. So we think we have a really unique situation out here that should attract a lot of attention from politicians and people across the country. Turning a national park, which is probably 50% covered by this warfare range, and maybe 100%, because we now, with these email revelations that they want to do this training all around the peninsula, we don't really know where it is because there's no map. And it's a World Heritage Site and an International Biosphere Reserve. And we have all sorts of endangered birds. And it's just, as far as I know, it's the first land grab of a national park to create a military training range. So we think if the Navy and the DoD is vulnerable on any front, this could be a real poster child for the anti-Navy group. So we're glad to be here. We're glad to offer our help to all of you, and we would sure like your help too. Thank you.
So she wants to Who's next?
Oh, we have an actual introduction next, and it's Karen Sullivan, who's here from the West Coast Action Alliance. And she is retired from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and worked both on the NEPA and endangered species issues. She's also, you know, many may be jealous of this, sailed small boats across the Pacific to New Zealand. So a woman with much experience. So Karen Sullivan is next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. I just want to thank Emily for making such a good presentation, and also Ron for setting the stage as well, because I'm going to be building on what both of them said. In a nutshell, the Naval Air Station Whidbey Island, which is one of several military installations in the Puget Sound, Olympic Peninsula area, is becoming a mega base. And that means they are going to have, as Ron said, 153 EA-18G Growler jets there. EA stands for electronic attack. The 54 attack helicopters from Joint Base Lewis McChord are going to be repurposed, and their pilots are currently training at Whidbey Island. 6 squadrons of these souped-up 737s have been relocated to Whidbey Island, so it's becoming a mega base. It's across the Admiralty Inlet from where I live, but we hear them as if we're next to the airport sometimes. People on Whidbey Island have recorded 130 decibels on their front porches, and there's jet noise just about every day. These jets are amazing. They use, in a bad way, they use 1,300 gallons per hour of jet fuel. The military is the #1 user in the world of fossil fuel. 70% of that is jet fuel. These jets are going to be flying for 260 days a year over the Olympic Peninsula for 8 to 16 hours a day, doing these combination of war games and electronic testing and training. One jet in 1 hour of flying produces over 12 metric tons of carbon in the air, carbon dioxide, and that is 1 hour of jet flying produces more than the average Washington citizen produces in a whole year. You'd have to drive a car 29,000 miles to produce 1 hour's worth of EA-18G Growler jet emissions. They're also twice as loud as the Prowlers, the EA-6s that they are replacing. The EA-6s are equivalent, I think, noise-wise to an F-35. A Growler is twice as loud. They also fly in trios, so you can triple that when they're flying in trios. So I'm going to present to you a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly. That was some ugly right there. And I'd also like to say hi to to our friends who are there. Emily from the EAC Preservation Council, our friends from CORE, Rick Abraham, from Save the Olympic Peninsula, and also if California Skywatch is listening. Our website is the westcoastactionalliance.org, westcoastactionalliance.org. And the purpose of our organization is to provide virtual support for varieties of groups who are doing more on-the-ground activism. So we are an information depot and a law library. Okay, so some good things that have happened. Public awareness of this issue is rising. We have had, since last October, actually mid-September, we've had 115 or 116 news stories. That's a good thing. The reservoir of public desire for action is growing. There are a number of websites and Facebook pages that are tracking the issue. Our group has 18 members from Alaska to California, and that doesn't include Canada, where individuals we're in communication with. And there are numerous smaller groups around that are pursuing more activist agendas. And more good news, in March, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Navy reinitiated formal consultation under Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, which means that the biological opinion, which is basically what the Navy has been using to justify no significant impacts all the way to the year 2020, is going to have to be redone. That will consist of a literature search on endangered species, mostly the marbled murrelet and the spotted owl, because there isn't time between now and October, when this will come out, to complete new studies. But hopefully there are lots of new studies out there. Also, one piece of news that may affect the outcome of the biological opinion is the fact that the spotted owl, which I'm sure you may have heard of, is the population numbers are tanking. And it is the Fish and Wildlife Service has accepted a petition, has said yes to a petition to look into reclassifying the spotted owl from threatened to endangered. So that could affect the outcome of this biological opinion, which, if a jeopardy call is made, would stop the project of having the Navy use the roads in the Olympic National Forest for driving their mobile emitters, which is a key part of this training. Closure of those roads would mean, right now, logging trucks can't drive up these roads during certain nesting seasons because it passes through critical habitat. All of these sites pass through critical habitat for both the spotted owl and the marbled murrelet. And loggers aren't allowed to go up there because their generators make too much noise. Well, an F-35 flying at 1,000 feet makes 110 decibels. If a growler is twice as loud as that, and they're allowed to fly at 1,200 feet over these areas, how come the Forest Service is agreeing with the Navy on no significant impact? So we're questioning that. So the biological opinion is going to be very, very important. Other things that have happened that are good are the Port Townsend City Council and the county commissioners of all three counties have written either comment letters expressing concerns about the lack of transparency in the process and about impacts to economic and environmental things on the Olympic Peninsula. So all three counties have, political parties, actually the Democratic parties in all three counties have adopted resolutions either complaining about the lack of transparent process or supporting other counties' resolutions. So that's also good. We have, like someone else said earlier, allies in loggers, commercial fishermen, and environmentalists, often strange bedfellows, but there you are. Now, some of the negatives here, going toward the bad part. Oh, one more good one is that during the comment period, the Forest Service had last year, it was right after the Navy sneaked that environmental assessment past the public and declared no significant impact in September. Then, as Ron described, that little tiny notice in the window of the Forks Post Office was the only notice that was given to the entire North Olympic Peninsula. And that triggered an article in a small newspaper, which triggered this explosion of public interest, which triggered an extension of the comment period by the Forest Service until 3,300 comments came in by the end of the comment period, and almost 800 more came in after the comment period closed. So 4,000 comments, all against. And this is, you know, a fairly low populated area, not so much as it was, but compared to urban areas. So that's a lot of comments. So some of the negatives. Our congressional delegation is tepid at best. Our congressman has focused on the process because that's what he can do. Because this is the biggest military spending state in the country. And it's the 6th district congressionally is one of the largest military spending districts in the country. We have the Bremerton Sub Base, we have Indian Island, we have Whidbey Island, we have, I mean, well, that's in another district, but we have a ton of military spending. So he's been able to focus on the process, but he won't address, and nor will, and our 2 senators, Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray, won't even answer our letters. They won't answer our calls, and part of this is because they are all being thanked profusely in a report that came out in 2012 called Expanding Military Spending and Presence, or something like that, and activity in the state of Washington, which we have on our website. So they're silent, and they've thrown us under the bus. And so, as someone else said, I think it might have been Roseanne, they're not speaking for us, so we have to speak for ourselves. We don't have legal representation yet. We're working on it, and we've been talking to a number of lawyers, and there is a buzz in the legal community, but so far not yet. Because if you take on the Navy, you take on Boeing, and you take on Congress, and those are 3 big opponents around here. So as a result, major media are not covering this issue, even though we've had actually a couple of 100 articles on this in the last 2 years. There's no major media, traditional major media coverage. The one coverage that we're getting that's fantastic is from an online news organization called Truth Out. And reporter Dar Jamal, who is sitting here next to me,
All right.
he's taking notes. But that is a huge outlet for us, and I really have to say, Dar, we really appreciate what you're doing. Okay, so you know the politicians aren't on our side. So what we have to do is basically some kind of combined public campaign out here with messages about our economy and about property values. And I hear that you are all talking about the same thing. So there needs to be some kind of message threads running through all of our work. And I think this meeting is really good for connecting us up. So I also hope that some of these presentations with the amazing facts that have been given will be accessible to the rest of us. Okay, so what are the tools that we have to use here? NEPA, of course, and most of you are very familiar, and it sounds like the Navy has a history of doing this. I was reading a book, they've been doing this for decades, this kind of shell game, so to speak, with their so-called NEPA process. And I completely agree with what Carol said earlier, that no NEPA process is legitimate until they address, these baseline and cumulative impacts. In this case, the Forest Service, coming up, however, this is a hook for us legally, I hope. The Forest Service plans, they've announced this in their schedule of proposed actions. They plan to adopt the Navy's environmental assessment, which was incredibly flawed and self-serving and contained science that was false. And the Forest Service did no investigative, research of their own to corroborate or validate or confirm what the Navy did, which violates the National Forest Management Act, as well as their own policies and guidance. So we have NEPA. If the Forest Service adopts this, I think there's a hook there with NEPA. We certainly have the Endangered Species Act, and I believe we have the State Environmental Policy Act called SEPA, because one of the good news pieces was the State DNR Commissioner wrote a letter to the Navy recently saying, I'm sorry, but 3 of your mobile emitter sites are located on DNR land, and we are not going to participate in your training and testing activities. And to which the Navy has pretty much publicly replied, that's not going to stop us. And oh, by the way, well, we might apply for a permit. They've been, moving around on this thing for 5 years without applying for a permit. So the DNR finally closed them off, and the Navy is now going to roll them, I suspect. The forest plan is being revisited and I suspect weakened. Some other things very quickly. State listed species. The tufted puffin is a state candidate species, and I suspect that may be used, I hope, as some ammunition for this biological opinion that is coming up, at least proposed for listing, because its populations are tanking as well. I think tearing off what Emily said a little while ago is that forcing the state to do its own NEPA or SEPA process on fish that are our endangered salmon runs are up there in the Gulf of Alaska that are going to in the bombing area. We have endangered salmon runs in Oregon and Washington, and I think the state needs to do SEPA on that. If anyone else has that kind of situation, the fact that migratory species don't respect political borders, the state avenue might be one. The last thing I'd like to say is we've been through 6 NEPA processes this year, thousands and thousands of pages. This is in a 12-month period. 5 separate NEPA processes in the last 5 months of 2014. The public is exhausted. Those of us who are keeping up with it are absolutely, it's too much. When you've got an organization that size doing that with lawyers, it's really, really hard to keep up with it. So I think linking up with all of the groups here is going to be a very powerful thing. One of the things that we are doing is we're putting together citizen research committees where people, they gather together and they say, okay, well, let's tackle this EIS. What's the next priority thing? Let's tackle this. Okay, you read this chapter, you read this, you read this. Let's pull out the things that are the most problem, and then we'll have those identified and cited for the page, and then we, with help from people who know NEPA, we do a citizen summary, and that goes on the website alongside of the actual, often BS, NEPA document that is produced by the Navy. So that's one idea. Anyway, there are a bunch more ideas. Do I have time to just close with something that would...
Yes.
Yes,
okay.
You do.
I want to just back up something that Emily had referred to, and that is the effect on fish. I mean, we know the effects on whales. Basically, this sonar explodes their ears, causes them intense pain. Imagine, I read an article that said, imagine having a golf ball inside your head that expands to the size of a basketball and then back again to a golf ball and does this like this. Imagine that. That's what it feels like to a whale. It's also, with all that noise out there, the equivalent of throwing a blanket over your head so you can't see. And so that way they can't hunt, they can't find their group, they can't do anything. So here's the effect on fish, and this is from the recently won Ninth Circuit Court decision, the complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief written by Earth Justice and NRDC. And I quote, "High-intensity sound has been shown to reduce the viability of fish eggs and to cause developmental damage in young fish. Intense sound can kill eggs, larvae, and fry outright or retard their growth in ways that may hinder their survival later. It has also been shown to injure the ears and lateral lines necessary for hearing in adult fish. Intense sound may also have harmful resonance impacts on fish with swim bladders, particularly larger pelagic fish such as tuna. We all know what's happening to our populations of tuna and swordfish. Because fish rely on hearing to locate prey and avoid predators, effects to their hearing both impair their ability to find food and increase their vulnerability to predation." So it's just all of these subtleties with regard to noise. Anyway, thank you very much, and I'm really honored to be in such company of people who are working this hard. Thanks.
I think there are just 2 more presenters unless others are online. Do you have any indication of others online at this point? Okay, then Bob Anderson from Stop the War Machine, New Mexico.
Let me give you these websites, if you can pull these up for me when I
Sure.
give you an indication to it, I'll go through those.
Sounds fine, thanks.
Thank you. I too am truly honored to be here with such a coalition group that Peaceful Skies has pulled together. I think it's the start of something new and something that we've been needing for a long time. I'm with a group in Albuquerque called Stop the War Machine, and if we can get, I'll pull our website up there. I'm just going to flash it up there to you. I didn't prepare a lot of slides and data, but I thought I'd pull up some things to try to illustrate a few things for you. Let me just briefly about myself. I'm a Vietnam veteran, was involved in the covert war in Laos and things like that, and saw the whole drug running and stuff that the CIA was doing, which started me on a whole path of awareness and information. And so I came back and got involved in the anti-war movement, helped start the VVAW, Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and then a group of us out of Albuquerque in '73 went to Wounded Knee and took part in the Native American uprising there. Did labor organizing for a number of years in steel mills, economic development, and then I moved back to Albuquerque after all the steel mills had closed and we lost our jobs. And I started a program there to get into education. And I started looking around Albuquerque, and the Kirtland Air Force Base was out there. And at first I thought it was sort of a benign kind of thing because I'd been in the Air Force and worked on nuclear weapons and things. But I began to, because I had an interest in all this, I just kept digging deeper and deeper into it, reading more and more, and I just became astounded at what I was finding. And along the way, Carol Miller and I, earlier before that, had ran for Congress as candidates on the Green Party tickets before, and then the attack on Iraq started shaping up after 9/11. So with my wife and I, we created this group called Stop the War Machine to focus upon the whole military-industrial complex with Dwight Eisenhower's famous statement about the dangers of the military-industrial complex. And we were looking around at what Albuquerque was, and we said, wow, we're sitting right here in the middle of this thing, you know, like this is something really to get involved in and take up. So we started a grassroots movement, and at that time a lot of people in the peace movement didn't want to criticize the military or the people at the base or in the labs. And so we said, well, we're going to do this, you know, we're just going to start holding demonstrations at the Kirtland Air Force Base and the military sites and trying to educate people, because people wanted to dumb themselves down around what was really going on. So there's a whole history to that went on up till about the time of the Occupy movement really became strong. We would mobilize demonstrations sort of repeatedly in the city, in town around the war. We'd go to Kirtland, we'd do campouts, we'd do vigils, anything that we could find when they were holding hearings and meetings like everyone has talked about here, we go to those. We go protest them sometimes when they're doing certain other kind of things. So we've been doing that for a good number of years there, and it's still continuing. And I wanted, so that's sort of the context of how we got into this and what we've been doing. Some of what I want to talk to you about, of some of the pieces of it. This is our website here. It's not up to date because our webmaster got married and had a couple babies, and she's been busy. But there are some things on there that just you can. I'm going to pull that one picture up there. No More War. That was at the local Chamber of Commerce conference meeting where they're all behind rah 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 for war. So we upset one of their meetings when they brought a lot of people out and stood there in the rain, and they've never been too friendly to us since then. Doing all that sort of upset their stories. Most people know sort of about New Mexico a lot for the nuclear weapons, the Manhattan Project, the testing of the weapons that went on at Trinity site. Los Alamos and Sandia Labs are sort of more known about that, and that's here. But what I began to learn and looking into this is that there's a lot more going on here in New Mexico. And in Eisenhower's term, what we come to the conclusion is that a place like New Mexico is a crown jewel in the whole military-industrial complex and the projection of power overseas in all these projects of trying to build a global empire, which is what the economy they're trying to do. And so we thought, well, all the trouble we can make for them, good, you know, slow them down. And several times we have been able to shut down Kirtland with our demonstrations because they sort of panic and react when we show up out there, and they'll throw the tank barriers up and things like that with a number of people. So we've had some fun along the way, you know, doing these kind of things and protesting them, especially around the build-up to the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. So as we begin to look into this, most people the Kirtland Air Force Base sort of grew as a support base for Sandia National Lab in Los Alamos and the nuclear weapons project. But along the way in the Cold War, it became much more than that. And I'll just say a little bit about the nuclear weapons. Carol mentioned it earlier. New Mexico would probably be the second or third largest world power of nuclear weapons if it succeeded on its own. And there is somewhere between 1,000 and 5,000 warheads stored just off the runway. If you fly in and out of there to the south of the runway, they built a huge underground bunker that's top secret. You know, Congress people have sworn to secrecy, military secrecy. They won't talk about it, but it's been in the newspapers, and so everybody sort of knows about it. It's a very dangerous proposition for a city of 600,000 people to have all these nuclear warheads stored there. There's no emergency plans, evacuation, or prevention of anything would happen. We went through a whole number of years with who's now our state senator, when he was on city council, trying to get them to address this. No talk. They won't mention any of these things. So that's going on, but there's a lot more. As you look around Albuquerque, everybody's here, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, everybody, Northrop Grumman, everybody is involved in building all these weapons for the military-industrial complex. So what it turns out is that Kirtland has become sort of a center of research and development. It used to be called the Air Force Weapons Lab. They changed that and cleaned it up to call it Air Force Research. And this is the Kirtland website. I was going to show you some pictures of some of the things that they have been putting on there, but I thought it was interesting. There's nothing on there anymore. It's all sanitized and cleaned up. They've done a real PR job on...
They all have, Janet's website, everybody's site is...
Yeah. There's really nothing on there, and even if you follow the links about the environmental pollution and stuff like that, guys, you got to go through pages and pages and pages, and then there's usually no maps to indicating this stuff. So Kirtland, though, is drones were developed here in the 80s along with Israel before they started becoming a real big thing. Kirtland is involved in special operations. They call it pararescue, but it's preparations for it's the special warfare operations and things that are going on. Big training function there along with DOE and National Nuclear Security Agency. The base itself is a huge training site for counterinsurgency. They call it protected nuclear weapons and things like that. All this advanced weapons that are coming out of there. We don't have a lot of weapons itself per se there, other than now the Ospreys, the CV-22s, and the C-130s, which are mainly there. But they do in conjunction with the research labs and the University of New Mexico, they do the advanced research on future weapons. So the prototypes come out of the electromagnetic bomb, the E-bomb, the electromagnetic devices to fry people. They call it perimeter control kind of things. All came out of research between the university through contracts and the Air Force Base there. And then these get shipped out to people like Northrop or Boeing, and they develop them into weapon systems. And the airborne laser had an adventure there for a number of years. That 747 that they were going to put a laser on, that's sort of defunct. It was too big and too heavy. But one of the things that along the laser line, which is one of their big areas of development now, is on the south side of the base around a place called Manzano Mountains. There's a project called Starfire. Most people don't know about it. It was initiated during the Reagan years as a part of Star Wars. And it's interesting that the technology and the optics of it are really interesting because you can use this kind of a cool reflective optic mirror to do space observations. Really good for that. But it's also good to turn it around and modulate a laser beam through it, and it becomes a weapon. And this is basically an anti-satellite weapon. There's about 3 of them in existence that I know of in the Air Force. One's out in Maui, Hawaii. And so they've got a flight path for satellites coming from the west over Hawaii to Kirtland and New Mexico area. With this laser anti-satellite weapon, they can burn up satellites in orbit. They can just fry their electrical systems, which is what they intended, what they've been doing with it and practicing. There's a big plan to boost that and to improve the power of it. Boeing is heavily involved in that. Boeing and the Air Force have gone together to create a space warfare, what they call a weather center. As they're learning about space warfare, weather is a very important thing up there. We don't think about it, but it is. The conditions of the atmosphere and what's going on in space affects a lot of the optics and laser kind of stuff like that. So at Kirtland, one of the things we now got is a space warfare planning center, which depends a lot heavily on the weather aspects of it. So we've got a whole ton of things there. One of the things that I think fits into a lot of what we're talking about, noise and environmental pollution, exactly here, is the CV-22s and the C-130s. They have, like at Canon and other places, they have brought in a whole fleet of these things. And what Ruth, this is where I met Ruth going down to look at one of the displays of the projects on the CV-22s and the landing sites that they're developing under. Oh, and she didn't tell you either, the area she's working in is down, if you saw the movie Contact and the story about the Very Large Array, that's the area, beautiful area of New Mexico. It's like pristine, you want to live there. And big valleys and kind of things, so she's right on the edge of that. And this is where they're going to be flying, expanding these the war games and these operations. Well, Kirtland, along with Cannon and some other bases in the Southwest, are involved in this whole large operation. And Carol has been, you guys have been seeing it up here, and I started following what they were doing. Then we began to see, well, this thing is expanding down through the south part of the state too. And it's being done for special warfare training. They call it here pararescue. Out of Kirtland, they have a big group called the 58th Special Operations Group, but these are basically hunter-killer teams. They go out in the middle of the night and kill people and then rescue their assassins that go out with them. They fly out of Kirtland, they train out of there. We see them all the time flying over our house. I don't see them from what we do, like you guys do up here, flying around, but we see them taking off and landing all night long. They'll go out towards sunset, fly out, and they'll come back in later in the middle of the night. And they've been out on these training missions, and they do it in the daytime too. We'll see them flying over with the C-130 refueling tankers. They practice the aerial refueling down towards Socorro, down towards Ruth's area. So the pararescue operations are a big thing there. Special forces training, and so we're just really involved in that, all that. And one of the latest things, if the site, if you can pull up that other one, which is the next one I got there.
SMMEP.
Yeah. We came across this, Carol and I, they recently. Let's see, it should go up there. And I think this is tied in with the Jade 15 project for the summertime too. Joint land use. This is preparing for a stronger region. I call it a super region. Kind of site here. West Texas, New Mexico, and some of Arizona. And if you go down to the bottom of this, there's a, let's see here, how to get there. Let's see, go back up here. Let me see here. Maps and reports. Down to the bottom of this. There is the one over on the right. Let's see, wait a minute, let me see. I think that's, go down a little bit. Here it is up here. Joint land use public meeting round 3. There's a map here in this publication of what they're planning. and move it. They're actually moving on this thing right now, joint land use. It's a huge training operation for these things. What they're doing is, and they very clearly have said that this is, they're doing a lot of this in the Southwest because this mimics the area of Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran, where they want to project future wars. So this is where they're headed.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, that's it there. You see Holloman up there.
Spaceport America.
Spaceport. Las Cruces is up there. Truth or Consequences. There's Fort Bliss in Texas, Texas-Mexico line. And from what I'm learning from Kathleen's and other projects like this, there's the whole, this is going on in piecemeal, pieces here and there and there and there, and it's not all put together because the Arizona projects, what you were talking about, bumps right up against this, and then there's other projects like this, what is it, Jude Helm 15, which is taking place in July, that incorporates all of this.
I've got that now.
You're going to talk about that some more? Yeah. Which covers this whole area, which is basically a counterinsurgency program looking for insurgents inside the U.S., basically. Domestic repression. So,
What's that site? And what was the site that, the site that was preparing Stronger Region, what was that site?
SNM MEP Joint Land Use.
Southern New Mexico, Texas.
Yeah, if I could, joint land use studies are going on all over the country. This is going to be one of the biggest. It's where the private sector basically gives up all of its authorities. The private sector and the public sector submit to the military needs. And it's pretty frightening. This is actually a piece of it. I've got the full map we could maybe look at later. But what's happened is the military thinks that the public is encroaching on the military. So these end up with encroachment agreements. And, this is a very big one that's going on right now in New Mexico. And once again, it doesn't show that if you put the Cannon Joint Land Use Study next to it and the others, the entire country is being divided now with what land, land and air and sea space the military has access to, including things like blocking solar and wind energy development. The military has the final say about where wind turbines can be placed, where solar energy can be, so it doesn't interfere with
their operations, yeah.
with their low level. And also they say that wind turbines and solar arrays interfere with their radar. So we have this strange situation where a lot of us think if we move to more renewable energy, we wouldn't need as much war. But we have the military saying, well, actually, you can't have renewable energy because it interferes with their war planning. So,
And
sorry
what Carol is talking about, we discovered it in the documents for this project here. They also, what they're doing is they're going in and having little community meetings with chambers of commerce and business people and saying, well, look, all this is going to bring jobs and money to your area. We just want you to sign this agreement, usually the officials of the townships and things, that, you won't say anything and do this kind of thing. And one of the things in there is they reserve the right to shut down GPS and cell phone communications and everything with local communities in addition to solar and wind and things like that, or people wanting to build. That means people will be blinded to what's going on, and they're going to be running into these war games. A lot of them are soldiers on grounds with checkpoints on the roads, airplanes, CV-22s and things in the sky. This is a full-scale big operation that they're planning. So anyway, Kirtland for us is a place where a lot of that's going on, operating out of, and we're trying to find out more, trying to educate people and do more about it. I just wanted to throw in a couple things too.
Excuse me, Bob?
Yes.
Could you please speak to the jet?
Oh, yeah, jet fuel.
Oh, I have the slide on that.
You got that?
has the-
Okay.
Yeah.
Big problem there with
We're
jet
going
fuel.
to overlap a little bit, I think.
Yeah. There's a big jet fuel leak there that's been going on that's about to shut down the city main water well. And Carol's got some pictures of that. We'll cover that in that talk there. I just wanted to point out a couple things too before my time's up here. That map that we saw in the first film that you showed the other night, the military bases, something about 1,000 of them. I just happened to notice on it, and this came to mind to me because I teach political science at the community college, and one of my students this year was an older guy whose son's in the Army, Special Forces. And I had been talking about what's going on in Africa. That map showed no bases, no operations in Africa that weren't, it's out of date. He came up to me and he said, if you knew what was going on in Africa with these bases and special forces, it would blow your mind. His son's coming back. I mean, Africa is the new place where they're launching these operations.
That's the thing I was saying, base versus sites.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we think there are about 900 bases, but there are 5,000 sites because they're not officially bases yet.
Like what we got
Yeah.
here.
And those are the detected or
Right.
professed ones.
Right.
Yeah, and what they're going to in Africa is these things called lily pad sites where they can roll them up and move them after a few months if they want to. Temporary landing fields and barracks and things like that. So these are springing up all over the place. So I think my time's up. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to. I mean, what Bob didn't tell us was getting arrested for protesting at the University of New Mexico and actually winning for that, trying to speak up and, really standing up. I just was looking for directed energy. I wanted everyone to know that. That is New Mexico's new economic development. And when I went online and just said Heinrich directed energy, I found out that just in March, our congressional delegation had a lot of press conference celebrating that there's a new directed energy in these labs. 2 of the labs are both based at Kirtland. Directed energy, the plan is to have a satellite or something very high elevation that will actually send a laser down and blow up a car. And I've seen Boeing is testing these at White Sands. You can actually find videos online of them driving this vehicle, and then they sit here and they blow up a lot of things. I'm going to go very quickly. You have that on there. Just to talk about the enormity of New Mexico, and I'm going to skip a number of the slides. And we have 3 Air Force bases in New Mexico, and we have the world's 2 biggest Army bases. They're White Sands Missile Range, and yeah, there you go. And then Fort Bliss, everyone thinks Fort Bliss is in Texas, but just this little corner is in Texas, and the rest of it is actually here in New Mexico. And I'm going to speak a little bit. There we are. We protested at the legislature. The legislature had a hearing where only the Air Force was allowed to speak. No member of the public. I had my senator and another senator I'm friend with go up to the chair asking to let me speak, and they turned down their own committee members and said, we set this up so only the Air Force could speak at this hearing. So we protested outside. Tony, who's here, is holding up a map, and all the black right now is current. This is a map the private pilots have to use. That's all restricted airspace. Flying around New Mexico is not an easy thing to do without getting shot down. You have to know all those areas where you have to go. So next, it's just, okay, we've got the 3 Air Force bases. We have the laboratory, the nuclear bomb factory. We also have what used to be the nuclear, where we would take military nuclear waste. It's closed for no one knows how long because of February of last year. There was both a truck that caused a fire, and then there was an accident where one of the safe drums, they said, actually exploded, and plutonium was released above ground, came up the shaft and came out into the environment, which is kind of historic, again, for Carlsbad. Carlsbad had a bomb test, in the 50s that went bad, and you can look it up, where it actually leaked plutonium. It was supposed to be an underground bomb test. The Trinity site, where the first atomic bomb was detonated near Alamogordo, that community is suffering, and they're finally getting, for the first time, a health study. A little late for them. So we can, go ahead, thanks. This is restricted airbase currently, and does not show MOAs. MOAs are the military operations areas, which are huge. So this was just to show, these are bases in the Southwest Defense Complex. So the next slide shows this showed up first in what some people would say very conservative or right-wing media. Someone leaked this slideshow to people about this from July to September of this year. There are going to be special ops war games potentially anywhere. They said there would be no advance pre-notice. And you notice that they have indicated Texas, Utah, and Southern California as definitely hostile. And then New Mexico is uncertain, leaning hostile. Light blues are uncertain, leading friendly. And we want to know hostile to who and friendly to who. Because the fact that people are getting paid to create the largest ever dealing with civilian uprising, that's what this is about, having ground forces on the ground, and it says in the document that they might be able to land in my field, on my private property, and unload a bunch of people with backup, with SUVs and other things, and conduct an operation. Peaceful Skies has sent a letter to the governor of New Mexico. We sent it, no response whatsoever, although I did get a receipt that she got it, saying that it must be restricted in New Mexico to, she can't say stop the whole thing. You know, so we said, please let the Pentagon know this could only happen on the military bases, not on any private or public land, or Playas, New Mexico, because the state of New Mexico taxpayers actually bought the town of Playas, New Mexico for the Department of Homeland Security for their urban warfare practice. It's operated by New Mexico Tech University. And it is an old mining community, and the mine shut down, and there was a town with very few people in it. So the entire town was bought for practicing. On Cannon's website, I had a very interesting reaction with the leadership because we followed them around Colorado and New Mexico to all their public hearings. So I had gotten to know Colonel Buck Elton pretty well, and so when I was on their website, they had a big thing about Colonel Elton participates on Kill Team, and they had a video, and they showed all over New Mexico are Afghan villages. To me, they look like Taos Pueblo or Picaris or Santa Clara. There are 22 on Fort Bliss. There's several on Cannon. So they practice breaking down people's doors, going in and killing people. And that's what a kill team and a kill house, and they're all over New Mexico, so I assume there are probably plenty in Arizona and other places. I found one place there on public land in California, on Forest Service land, actually permitted them to construct a village on our public lands, which is so outrageous to me because the Forest Service here stopped a project, an irrigation project in my community because we were going to have a concrete truck cross 50 feet of Forest Service land. and they stopped our project, our community is still suffering without water, irrigation water. And then I go and start finding they are constructing villages for war games, all this stuff on the Forest Service with easement and casual use permits that the BLM and the Forest Service are giving the military access. We don't want this to happen, because what I worry about, and I put in the governor's letter, and I can share it with people later, what if someone didn't get the message that it was practice? You know, what if something lands in your yard and all these people come out with guns? Well, many people are well armed and might shoot thinking they're defending themselves and their property, and then does it go from blanks to real? How does anyone know? How will every single person in all of those states know that this is just a military exercise? And how could the president of the United States allow something like this to happen? When it first came out, the military said, well, we're not sure that's accurate. We don't know who created that map. We're going to tell you on March 31st. On March 31st, they confirmed to the Washington Post that, in fact, this is their plan. This is in the works. And, you know, this is what summer and fall will look like here if we're not careful. Next slide, please.
Carol, how can we get a copy of that map?
Well, I can share it, and also if you just go Jade Helm 15, it's all out there.
It's in the Washington Post article, I think.
Yeah.
Too.
So I just want to say, when we started, we went after our congressional delegation right away. We had to tell people, this is what they want. You know, you might be trying to get $100,000 for your acequia, your irrigation system, but this is what they want. But what I didn't realize before I got into this, and you can move to the next slide, this is what they said they were going to do, low altitude training. What they always do is they come out and they've got this huge area. Okay, so next slide. Then they say, oh, look, we cut it. And so there's that little line, the red, is what the Air Force said they were cutting back because we were so opposed to it. But what they didn't say is the big rectangle in purple already is a low altitude training area, but it's not cannons. That's Peterson Air Force Base and Fort Carson. They already had, they are very creative. We try, you know, they pay people a lot of money, and I'm sure they sit in those meeting rooms and they go, we'll show them that big map, and then they'll think they won some concessions, but in reality, we didn't win anything with that. They already had that. Next slide. So this is what happened first. They had, just comparing how we were able to stop it, they were not used to anything. They had done their big EIS. They had 3 meetings. They were all Clovis, Fort Sumner, Clayton. They're all very much adjacent to Cannon. And they had 19 people comment in total at the 3 meetings. 131 participants. When we started organizing, we had 855 people, these are their numbers, show up at meetings. And, you know, we were able to generate 1,898, 1,900 comments by organizing. They won't even say how many people have commented. This is why they dropped that project for the time being. They had just opened something they weren't really prepared for. Next slide. But a German newspaper, Der Spiegel, talked about this, the woes of an American drone operator, and this is coming out more and more. And anyway, just saying there he was, but the next page, and you can read it. Cannon Air Force Base. I had the legislative director of Senator Bingaman, when he was still senator, tell me there were no drones at Cannon. I have to read a German paper that someone sends me I send it to Binghamton's guy, and they're like, oh, news to us. Really? I don't think so, you know? And there was another article in the New York Times when they let some reporters on to Holloman to get to see how great all the drone stuff was, and the reporter said, wait, isn't that right outside the base? They were targeting someone driving their SUV adjacent to the base. And that is how they practice. How they practice is you're driving down the road, minding your own business, and somewhere someone is sitting there and they've got the crosshairs on your truck. That's how they practice. That's what targeting means when they talk about the kinds of training that they're doing. Next slide. This, I know you can't read it, but this was a big press release from the Air Force that our state lands, they gave state lands to expand the Melrose bombing range. The state lands are for education of our children in New Mexico. The big press conference, big deal about that. We now have a bigger bombing range for Cannon Air Force Base. Next. Cannon has no water. How can they expand? Well, our legislature, they give them money to acquire land and water rights statewide. Anyone else getting any help for water rights? I don't think so. So you see, states are subsidizing the military to a huge extent that most people are not aware of. Every governor's office has a whole base planning commission. When Cannon got this new mission, the state built them a new road. They built them a brand new middle school. Holloman's got a new clinic under construction right now. These are state funds on top of what the federal government already is putting into these. So if anyone in state government tells you they don't have money like they do in the federal government, it's going to subsidize the military. Next. White Sands Missile Range, one base, 17% of all the land. And here's what they do. We will aggressively expand our customer base of traditional, non-traditional DoD, other government agencies, foreign military and commercial programs. It's a rent-a-base for money. Okay, doesn't matter all the people that are there. Keep going. I'm going to really try and move pretty quickly. Fort Bliss is the second biggest Army base in the world, and what they don't tell us is base one, number 1 and number 2, they are identical. It's really just one big base with Holloman kind of in the middle. Next. So Holloman, they're a stealth base. They have people's windows get broken all the time. Their car alarms go off. They have a website, and someone was going to try and close in. The sonic booms are one of their biggest things. Next. Okay, here's how many currently. They have 103,000 flights a year. I mean, all of us can do the math. Their congressman, Steve Pierce, is trying to get the F-35. If the F-35, it'll be 150,000 flights a year of the noisiest aircraft ever. And then...
Have you calculated the cost of that?
Yeah.
I mean, incredible.
Yeah. And then they go up, they fly, and then they bomb things. So 260,000 munitions blown up. They're big. We're not talking the bullets that we saw on the ground-based people up in the national forest. We're talking about weapons and training flares. The numbers they're just phenomenal what's going on. Next. And that's actually the full southern New Mexico joint land use study area. It's because it includes the tribal land. Fort Bliss is the big beige thing. See that, just that tiny little piece in Texas of Fort Bliss? I mean, I even thought it was all in Texas. Little did I realize you know, and see how Fort Bliss butts right up there to White Sands, and you got
Ruth, that's your
Holland
place up there.
in the middle, and
Where she's at.
you know, that's what's going on right now in New Mexico. Next. Kirtland. Here's Kirtland's mission statement. Conduct nuclear operations and their priority, strengthen gains in the nuclear enterprise mission. I don't want another nuclear bomb ever to be dropped anywhere in the world. And yet, our state leaders are patting Kirtland on the back all the time and underlying all their other missions. This is their primary mission, to be the people that will drop a bomb, a nuclear bomb or bombs somewhere when the order comes in. Next. Here's the jet fuel. 24 million gallons. We heard about the Exxon Valdez. We have twice as much jet fuel under the ground in Albuquerque that leaked. Now, I've worked for the federal government, and, you know, no one is auditing you. Why are you buying more and more fuel and no one's noticing that you haven't used what you had? Where'd it go when those tanks were empty? Where was there anything approaching accountability to the people? Nowhere. And so they said it was 100,000 gallons, that's bad enough. But no, 24 million gallons of jet fuel disappeared in Albuquerque without anyone in the Air Force noticing. Okay, that is stunning to me, absolutely stunning. And here's the thing, for someone who's worked in public health, I don't want to, you know, really bum you out. We don't know what to do about any of this. We have no clue. We don't know how to make unsafe things safe. Burying nuclear waste is like humankind's most primitive solution to problems. Well, we'll dig a hole and we'll put it in the ground. That doesn't work anymore. We're talking about toxic materials. We're talking about a lot of things. And if you've ever heard anyone discuss synergy, I never do at any of these meetings. So synergy is where two things might be bad, but those two things together are 10 times worse. There is no funding for research into synergistic effects among all of the environmental things that humankind, animal kind, sea life, air. Zero. You will not find it anywhere, except if they can say the problem was caused by smoking. Okay? Because smoking, it's the person's fault. You know, the diabetes epidemic, nobody wants to talk about. Why don't people's pancreases work anymore? I mean, people have been eating all kinds of food for a long time. There's underlying very large public health things that are not going to be addressed. Agent Orange is one of the biggest risk factors for diabetes and other health problems. And there's a lot of denial still about that. I worked very closely with the Hanoi chapter of Veterans for Peace and supporting the work around Agent Orange. And I've been to Vietnam 3 times, and we're guilty of war crimes, all of us. I saw, you know, I was there a year and a half ago. I saw my first 4th generation Agent Orange affected baby in a Buddhist orphanage. Marilyn?
I was wondering, isn't there some relationship between Agent Orange and Roundup?
Yeah. Okay. We could get to that later. Okay. So the next slide. So they have open house on all these spaces, so you could never start them too young, right? I mean, this was on Kirtland's website one time, and I just thought, okay, honey, get up there and yeah, what a great picture. We all like posted it on our Facebook.
They've taken all these away. They don't exist on there anymore.
Next slide. I think I only have, okay, where's that economic benefit from military spending? That's a map of poverty in New Mexico. And it's slightly outdated, it's not too different. That little white dot in the middle, that's the wealthiest county in the US. That's Los Alamos. Where I live, and you know, if I'd had more time, what's happening with poverty we always say Social Security is going to run out because people are living longer. Actually, that's not true. We just had the biggest decrease in life expectancy among rural women, greatest loss of potential life ever in the history of this country, and my county, Rio Arriba, tops that list. Okay, so show me that economic benefit. Where is there any economic benefit? All those red counties underneath that blob over there, they're all adjacent to Cannon Air Force Base. They are high poverty counties. Okay, Holloman's in the sea of red. We have no economic benefit from it at all. What we have is higher cancer rates, we have higher crime rates, we have poverty that is so unjust. I mean, I know we've got school teachers, retired school teachers in the room. I see that poverty every day. We're burying one of our kids in Ojos Arco on Tuesday, and we're losing our kids because we're wasting all of the resources of this state, polluting all of our natural beauty. For what? To go to other countries and kill and ruin their country also.
Carol, that must be the only reasoning I can see for an economic benefit, because so many of our students join the Army, Navy, Air Force, because that's the only thing in our town. Right.
Yeah. So
And
anyway,
also to add a little credibility, Carol's over the other side of the hill from me, and where I live, I have often thought helicopters are going over my house. Are they going to land in the field right in front of me? And I see low planes. Before you made those 1,800 comments, the planes did not respect flying 500 feet above a person or a house. And I have come out and seen what I think are DMs, huge aircraft, 2 of them coming through our valley, and then there are the stone bluffs, and they're probably playing games of how close can we get into that canyon, and where the other stones are on the bluffs, how close can we get to that pinnacle? And if they crashed, the jet fuel could cause a forest fire. So just a little personal reality of the war games.
yeah, it is, and it's not games. There's no difference to an elk of a training flight or a war. I mean, we have to be realistic. It's war. It's war. I call it war practice. I hate the word game. I always put it in quotation marks. But I'm over time. We all are. I want to thank everyone for their patience.